Well, good evening, members, officers, visitors and members of the public. I'm Councillor Tim Gibson and I'll be chairing this evening's meeting. The meeting will be recorded and proceedings will be conducted in accordance with the Council's constitution, including, of course, procedure rules which are available on the Council's website. Item 1 on the agenda, the emergency evacuation procedure. There is no planned evacuation drill this evening, and accordingly, if the alarm sounds, it's to be treated as a genuine need to evacuate. There are emergency exits to my right, or through the passageway to my left as you leave the chamber, and then via the main staircase at the front of the building. Please note, lifts must not be used. The assembly point is on the far side of the car park, and it's important that you remain there and do not return to the building until I've announced that it's safe to do so. If anyone present will need assistance in evacuating and negotiating the stairs, could you please inform me now so that we can make the necessary arrangements to assist you? This meeting has a quasi-judicial role and determines the rights and obligations of the applicant. Members must consider each application and everything that is said in the meeting concerning the application, and make their decision based solely on their planning judgment of the information which is available to them. Following a decision by members, delegated authority is given to the planning officer to issue the decision notice, and planning permission is not granted until the issue of that decision notice. Any member of the council who is not a member of the planning committee may attend as a visiting member and may speak, having given prior notification. Such visiting members may, of course, include ward members, and whilst visiting members can speak on an application, they are not permitted to vote. Any member acting as a substitute on the planning committee must have undertaken appropriate training before doing so. Members must remain in the meeting for the whole time that each item is being debated, and should not vote on that item until they have done so, unless they've done so. I would now like to welcome our public speakers and remind you that you have 3 minutes to speak, and an audible warning of time will be given when there are 30 seconds remaining. If the meeting is deferred to conduct a site meeting, you may speak both at this meeting and at the site meeting, but there will be no further opportunity to speak on the matter when it comes back to the planning committee. The meeting will follow the order set out in the agenda. However, I will amend the order if there's good reason for doing so. And in particular, I will take any items first where a member of the public has registered to speak, before moving on to the remainder of the agenda, and I will verbally reorder the agenda as appropriate. Item 2 on the agenda is apologies for absence, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies received from Councillor Simon Clark, Councillor James Hall, Councillor Carol Jackson, Substitute Councillor Ken Rolls, Councillor Tim Valentine, Substitute Councillor Alistair Gould. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, item 3 on the agenda is to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 7th of April 2022, minute numbers 742 to 747 as a correct record. Do you agree, members, that we can record them as such? Thank you very much. Item 4. I now invite members' declarations of disclosable pecuniary interests under the Localism Act. Councillor Gould.
I have a pecuniary interest in item 2.8 and 2.9 as they're linked, as I'm the owner of a GP practice third premises, and there's a section 106 potential for that.
Thank you. Members, disclosable non-pecuniary interests under the Code of Conduct, adopted by the Council. Councillor Hunt, please.
Thanks, Chair. Declare an interest in Part 6, and we'll be able to explain when we get to that point. It's okay.
Thank you. I'd like to remind the meeting that where it's possible that a fair-minded, informed observer, having considered the facts, would conclude that there's a real possibility that a member might be predetermined or biased on any agenda item, the member should declare this possibility and then leave the room whilst that item is considered. We now move on to item 5, which is the formal part of the agenda, and it's to consider the attached Head of Planning report, parts 2 and 5 from our Head of Planning. And the first item that we'll be doing is item 2.1. And this one is 21/503749/REM, and it's land on the southeast of Bartlett's Close, halfway. And I thank the officer for an outline introduction and any updates, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've shared my screen, so I hope that's visible in the committee chamber, which is showing a site layout plan for the proposal. The site is located to the south of an existing cul-de-sac named Bartlett's Close and is adjacent
Sorry,
to the...
Brennan, could I just ask you to pause for a second?
Yep,
It's
no
very
problem.
quiet at the minute in the chamber. We can't hear you too well.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, could you give us a quick sound check now?
Is this okay?
Yes, much better, thank you.
Okay, I'll start again. Can everyone see the screen first of all? I've shared a site location plan for the proposal. So item 2.1, the site is located to the south of an existing cul-de-sac named Bartlett's Close and is adjacent to the built-up area of Halfway. The application sites benefits from outlined planning permission for 17 dwellings and includes detailed approval for the access into the site. As outlined, planning consent has been approved for the 17 dwellings. Matters such as the principal development, highways impact and impact on services and facilities have been considered acceptable by virtue of the outlined consent. The current proposal seeks approval of 4 reserved matters, which are appearance, landscaping, layout and scale. As the application is for the approval of reserved matters, the consideration should only relate to the narrow range of issues arising from these reserved matters for which approval is sought. The committee report for this item provides an appraisal of the scheme against each of these headings. As you'll see from the plan on the screen, the proposal is for 17 dwellings and it comprises a mix of 2, 3 and 4 bedroom dwellings. These are mainly 2-storey with one pair of single-storey bungalows at plots 16 and 17. The dwellings are mainly semi-detached with one row of terraces, which are plots 7, 8 and 9. The houses are sited either side of the internal access road and front into the site and include on-plot parking spaces with areas for front gardens and soft planting. Along the southeastern and southwestern boundaries, there is a 5-metre deep natural landscape buffer, which will comprise a mix of native hedgerows and trees. And I'll have a series of 3D visuals which the applicants have sent in, which I will go through now. The applicant provided these from a video which was circulated to members before the committee briefing. And just give an overall visual of the site. Other than that, there are no updates. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Could I now please invite Mr. Basher or Mr. Theobald to speak on this item? Thank you.
Good evening. Hello. My name is Ricky Theobald. I'm one of the applicants behind this development. I just wanted to speak briefly about a number of the key points raised or key objections raised by some of the residents. First of all, the road. I know this was a big one. I'd like to mention that we're going to, we're going to look after the road throughout the development. We are going to maintain the road, and we have said that following the completion of the development, the road will be left in a better state. We're going to completely resurface it and it will be left in a better state than it is now. This is also related to my second point, which is the flooding. Now, a big concern by some of the residents is the flooding from the site down onto the road in heavy downpour. Now, the makeup of the hard standing materials are going to be porous. So this will alleviate a lot of the flooding that currently occurs with down the street. Yeah, we take on board what the residents say. We're not a large development company, it's the 2 of us, and we do take pride in what we do, and we actually care about what the residents, we want to keep everybody happy. There's been concerns raised about the overdevelopment of the site. I hope that the 3D images that were just shown sort of show that the site is very, it's nicely spaced out. It's not too overdeveloped. I think somebody mentioned earlier there's going to be some large contributions made via 106. Section 106 payments need to be made in excess of £200,000 actually. So should the development go ahead, then payments will be made. We're going to be spending in excess of £3 million on this development. A lot of that money is going to be spent locally. The materials are going to be purchased from local suppliers. Local tradesmen alike should be employed on the site. It was previously passed for the outlying planning permission at appeal. A lot of the planning, or we feel as though a lot of the policy framework has been met with the current design. We feel we've tried our best to meet the demands of everybody and also keep everybody as happy as possible. So if you give us this opportunity, hopefully everybody can see that the site will come out to be a nice development. We're not intending on just churning out basic mass developed homes. So give us that chance and hopefully we can show you a good job. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. I now move the officer recommendation. Could I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Joyce. And this is in the ward of Councillor Marchington and Councillor Beard. So I'll come to you. Should you wish to inform the debate initially? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've sent a little sketch around to be issued out to everyone. It's just to explain something I'll be highlighting shortly. Now, I'd like to run. I know this is all about tonight. Is only about the access on the site itself, but there's a few things I want to bring to your attention as we run through the report. And it starts off at item 1.3 on your paperwork. Page 10. It says there is existing vehicle access from the site from Bartlett's Close and currently comprises of 2 gates. It mentions the gates. Now, the point here is that it's vehicle access only. It is not a 2-way road that's available to them. I've got property myself where I had to cross Stirling Road, well, not me personally, but it was own ground there where we had trouble with a developer before and had to win a court case to get access. And the access was 3.2 metres. That's the old 10'6" rule, and that's what they call a vehicle access, and that's what all it is to up this close is that site. And there's been no attempt to try and negotiate the residents or make any deals with residents or even try to buy the ground for this. So I'm just making sure that everyone's aware you're talking about the access to the site itself, on the site itself, not in Bartlett's Close. I'd like to move on quickly now to on 2.1. It said that it was granted access on the appeal sort of thing, but of course that's all back to the 1 and 3. It is only a right of access. You're on 2.5. You're talking about it mentions that the vehicle access is provided via Bartlett's Close, a private unmade road, which I've just discussed, and the access details of the turning head, T-shaped turning head, which is on the site. I'm not trying to discuss anything with that point tonight. If I move on again, and we're now to 7.6. Find myself, hang on a second. It says KTC Highways raised no objection. Now, that's not quite a clear statement, because in the second paragraph it said KTC Highways do not intend to offer any comments as the land is not going to be put out for adoption. So therefore KTC has no jurisdiction over this land and therefore is unable to comment. Not the fact that it raises no objection, it can't give any view one way or the other. So I think the wording is slightly misleading. the last sentence on the 7.6 is the local planning authority will therefore be expected to undertake the relevant assessment of these details, which is us today. But we're still not, there's still no move about the road from Bartlett's Close. Now, so that, I'll finish on that part. I want to talk about the flooding now. The little sketch I've issued round to everybody is just merely because I do sometimes get judged where they describe the central Sheppey area as just being like poor ground, you know. The item 5.5. By the landscape, its central Sheppey farmlands comprise of clay farmland landscape types and the condition described as poor with moderate sensitivity. Now, on the little sketch I've sent round, we have clay hills that erode into sort of valleys and pits, and then the erosion into these valleys creates soil. It comes from the hill erosion, volcanic ash, decaying plant life, and that becomes for me real good quality soil areas. And the area in Belgrave, Bartlett's, is all very good quality ground. And that also allows the water to permeate into it. You've got situations where water is running off the top of Bartlett's at the moment into the roads, into Uplands Way and into the gardens there. Water also trickles down along the top of the clay line. And that is a continuous process going through. Some of the gardens at the bottom of Uplands Way on the north side do have run-outs of water from under their houses weeks after there's been rain. There's still water coming out from the bottom of their foundations, which is the water going round. So what concerns me is the plan to create fast drain areas onto the soil, which will just put water to the lower areas where it will speed up the run through to other areas. And that is my really serious concern here. The item 7.8, 7.5 and 7.8, both the KCT Flood and Water Management and the Lower Medway Internal Drainage Board have both raised concerns regarding the attenuation of the surface water to improve filtration into the ground. We'll be very careful with this. If it's too fast in infiltration to low levels, will increase the water run and possible or probable breakout into gardens north of Uplands Way. And I'd like you to please note as a final item, item 8.4.8. On page 23, it mentions the drainage, and in respect to the drainage and service water, some water, the lead of local authority, KCC and Lower Medway Internal Drainage have been consulted. The outline consent includes a number of conditions that require discharging, and they still require discharging, including condition 7, which we've just been discussing, to ensure that serves as satisfactory arrangements for the disposal of surface water to ensure that development does not exacerbate the risk of on-off-site flooding. Now, there's been no details put forward to exactly what they're going to do or attempt to do with this attenuation and how fast they want to push water into the ground and what probable moves. So I don't think we have enough information on the safety of the flooding in order to vote today. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Burt, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. So when the outline application came to us, it was refused unanimously by the committee. It went to appeal and was overturned on appeal. And I think we have to respect that the principle of development and the access has been dealt with by a inspector and not by us. And what we need to look at now is what development's going to come forward, whether it's appropriate and whether it meets our standards and our design. I have concerns with the design that's in front of us, mainly, and I can't remember the plot numbers, apologies, but it's the 2 on the left as you come in next to number 10. If we can zoom in on those, if possible, on the design. Plots 1 and 2, you can see how far further forward they sit compared to the current building line. And I think given the topography of the site, when you're standing in Bartlett's Close, you are going to see a flat brick wall. The neighbours at number 10, when they look out of the front of their property, all they're going to see is a brick wall. I think there could be a better design layout than what is being proposed. I'm glad that number 16 and 17 are proposed to be bungalows. The whole of Bartlett's is bungalows, and some of these that are being proposed are townhouses. It is not in keeping with the existing street at all. And on that basis, I would like to ask members to indulge in a site visit, to stand on site and see the topography, stand at the bottom of Bartlett's and walk to the top, and you'll see that although you won't see what's going to be built, you'll be able to see the difference in land levels and the surrounding area. So I would like to make that as a proposal, please.
Okay, thank you. Members, do we have a seconder for that proposal? Thank you, Councillor Darby. Those in favour of a site visit? Those against? And abstentions? So that's 9 for, 4 against, and 4 abstentions. So that motion is carried. We'll conduct a planning working group meeting at the site. Councillor Beat, please.
Could we ask if it's possible to mark out the plots so when we're on site we can see where the base will be?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dender.
Thank you, Chair. As there's going to be a site visit, will there be any further detail as to the points that Councillor Marchington has brought up and the LMIDB has brought up in the report about testing of attenuation?
That's a nice acronym, but a few people might be a bit confused.
Sorry?
With the Lower Medway Drainage Board.
The Lower Medway Internal Drainage Board.
Thank you.
As they've made a point that there are
we'll get the first to speak to the developer on that. Thank you. I'm now going to start the first portion of juggling the agenda. We're going to move on to item 2.3, please, as this one has got parish council member speaking on this one. And it's item 22/501431/ and it's Gracious Place, Homestill Road, Doddington, Kent. And I thank the officer for an outline and any updates, please.
Right, hello, Chairman. Have you got my screen up? It's my advice.
Sorry, Mr. Thomas, could I just ask you to hold for a second? We've got lots of people
Sure.
leaving the chamber.
Okay. Oh, there we go.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, right. Well, there isn't any additional information to present to you tonight. I'm just showing you an aerial photograph of this location, which, as you can see, is pretty remote. And the site layout within that remote site is that the lanes on the right in this photograph, the existing mobile home, which you've got a temporary planning permission until the middle of next year, is this black one here. And the mobile home we're being asked to deal with tonight is very much in the back corner of the site. So on this photograph, it's right down where my little pointer is. The existing one's here, so I can make that a bit bigger, hopefully. Yeah, so in principle, we've got a site which is largely surrounded by trees, to be fair. And the original mobile home is to this position, and the new one is right back in this corner as per this little plan. And it looks like the one we've got now has already been put on there. So it looks like this. It's a standard, but quite large mobile home. And there's there for the son of the people who've got, one of the people who got temporary planning permission, and it's explained in the report why that's there. And you'll see also that we've recommended we simply allow this for a short term while the existing temporary permission expires, and we can look at the entire situation with both mobile homes later on. but essentially we're saying this isn't a good site for a permanent gypsy and traveller site. But there's a temporary permission for one caravan, and it seems to be sensible to allow the second one to be there just for this short time. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd now like to invite Parish Councillor Kevin Atwood, please, to speak on this one.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, councillors. Now, this is a site which has a relatively recent planning position, which was established at appeal, and the decision was on the 18th of July 2018. And as the officer says, the inspector was clear, the site is unsuitable as a permanent gypsy and traveller site, but it was granted a temporary personal permission with strict conditions. Now, this application is retrospective and it's related to a clear and significant breach of those conditions, in that there is an additional mobile home has been installed on the site, and the occupant and the applicant is not one of the named individuals in the extant personal permission. So as such, when Doddington Parish Council first looked at that, we considered that we should object to the application. And we were also of the view that any decision should be made by the planning committee with a clear and reasoned officer's report to inform the decision-making process. And the Parish Council did have the opportunity to meet again on Monday this week, and we spent some time discussing this application with the benefit of the officer's report, which you've got on the agenda this evening. Now, we do note the officer's analysis of the GTAA, the 5-year supply position and the current windfall policy approach. And we are actually encouraged, as it appears to be delivering more than sufficient gypsy and traveller pitches. And that has been accepted recently as policy by independent inspectors. Now, we also note the officer's appraisal, and we came to the view that it was a very fair consideration of the personal circumstances of the applicant, and more particularly his mother. And it seeks to find an acceptable way forward for all parties. And for those reasons, Doddington Parish Council does not object to the officer's conclusion nor the recommendation before you this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Members, I move the officer recommendation. Thank you very much. Councillor Simmons, just in time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and my apologies for arriving late. Life got in the way, as they say.
It's these elderly track.
I wasn't aware that the Parish Council were going to withdraw their objection, which kind of takes away what I was going to say. But it does seem to me that it's unfortunate to have a retrospective application for something which has only got only 1 year to run, as it's a temporary permission anyway. So I'd just like to know what reassurance I can be given and the Parish Council can be given that the site will be cleared in June of next year, prior to the running out of the temporary permission. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Thomas, can you help us with that one?
Well, the situation will be, of course, that the planning permission will run out next July, or both of them if we go with this tonight. If the site isn't cleared in accordance with the fact that it's a temporary planning permission, then the options in front of us will be either to consider another application to allow the caravan to continue, or take enforcement action. And obviously, if we take enforcement action, there's a real possibility that there'll be an appeal. The enforcement action will automatically require a 28-day commencement period before the time for compliance will cut in. And with a residential occupation of a site such as this, we would normally require the cessation of the use and the clearance of the site within not less than 12 months, because it's someone's only home. Otherwise, we'd be normally felt to be inappropriately taking account of that personal circumstance. And if there was an appeal, that 12 months would be stayed until the appeal was, and until the appeal is upheld, and then start again after that. So it's not unlikely that we'd be seeing the site cleared within a couple of years, unless the applicants decide to clear it themselves. The other point to bear in mind is, in terms of looking at a fresh permission, this permission is granted The original permission here, the 5-year temporary permission which currently is running, has been granted in a very peculiar manner because of the fact that the local plan doesn't have any provisions in it for people who resort to living in mobile homes who don't meet the definition of gypsy and travellers. And you had a similar application in Upchurch a month or two to consider. So unless the local plan is published by next July and includes a proposal for dealing with this category of housing, it's likely that we'd feel obliged to recommend a further temporary planning mission. So that's the realistic state of affairs here, and that slightly hangs on the content and progress on local plan. Chairman.
Thank you. Members, Councillor Winkles.
Thank you, Chair. Can the officer just, in our usual fashion, show me some photos, if he's got it, of the surrounding area or the site before I make my decision?
I'm afraid there's not a lot to see. You can see it's agricultural land in all directions, and the M2 is just below the bottom of the screen.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Norris.
You've got no further ground photographs of ground?
No.
Okay, right, thank you.
Thank you. Right, members, seeing nobody else indicating, those in favour of the officer recommendation? Those against? And abstentions? Okay, that's 13 for and 2 against. So permission is granted subject to the issue of the decision notice. Members, now move on to item 2.4. And this one is 22/501 556 full, and it's Greystone, Bannister Hill, Borden. And I'll thank the officer for an outline, please. And once again, any updates? Thank you.
Right, hello again, members. You'll remember we've been here fairly recently. We had a site meeting. I seem to remember an extraordinarily cold morning in maybe November. We had the site visit. It's the site's in here. I've got a better photograph in a second which shows the boundaries of it. It's all within the local plan defined built up part of Borden. The red area is the area where we're looking at including access from the road, and the blue area is where 2 houses are already being built. You'll notice there are 3 houses backing onto the site here. A 4th house with a very long garden to the one side, and the objections are from these houses here, this one here, a house opposite, and a house in here. So they're from various sides of them. You remember we had an application for 2 houses. And one was very close to the boundary, and there was lots of talk about whether or not they're overshadowed. This property called Wycombe here with a relatively short back garden, and there were lots of lines drawn on sections about whether they met BRE daylighting standards and things. And there was a problem where the extension to the house at Wycombe hadn't been shown in the original plans, and that was then corrected. And then the various 25-degree lines from the various windows and rooms of the house were shown, and you saw that one of them just about clipped the roof of the house that proposed there in this red outline. That red outline was the house this house on the left, and the red outline were the 2 houses that you refused planning permission for. This is the new scheme. The house on the left is the same. The house on the right is now reduced in height. You can see in the report it's reduced by about 5 feet in height in old money. It's from 8.5 metres to 7.25 metres, something along those lines. And it's also reduced from its full 2-storey wall on the boundary nearly to a single-storey eaves height with the sloping roof going away. And you can quite clearly see from this diagram that the 25-degree lines don't now conflict with the house. What we've got is a layout plan which is very similar to what we had before. The footprint of this what we call chalet bungalow now is slightly larger than the footprint of the previous house. It's slightly longer front to back, you might call it, but obviously it's a bit lower. So that's what we've got. We've got the distances now specified on here. We said to you before that 11 metres from rear windows to a two-storey flat wall was the policy we normally applied for. You can see these are much more than 11 metres, and it's a single-storey eaves height. So there has been some changes from the previous application. The objections to the scheme basically don't recognise the changes, and they feel that this is at least as bad, or because it's a bit longer and the building's a bit bigger in footprint, but it's a lot lower on the boundary. And we recommended the last application for approval because we felt it meets our standards, and we felt that there's no way we could change that because this is less harmful to those neighbours. And we've updated all the reports and the conditions that we added in last time, so we're totally up to date with the report. There is an update report simply because the applicant has noted the objections and has tried to respond to them. So there's a table update which starts by saying, number one, Natural England don't raise objection unless there's a SAMS payment. That's a standard response from them. And secondly, they try to address objections from the neighbours at Bellamy and at Brearley. That's these two properties down here. That's Bellamy and Brearley's the one down here, the very long garden, who are concerned about overlooking from the windows which don't face towards their rear windows, but at right angles, as you can see from the first two plans on the update. And the neighbours are expressing their concern that the distances from those rear windows, the angle of view, is likely to invade their privacy. I feel that the blue triangle on the screen in front of you is a more realistic 45-degree line from the middle of the window than the plans drawn by the owner of Bellamy, which shows an extremely acute angle, which I think is unrealistic unless you're sticking your head out the window and leaning it to the side, which is not the sort of behaviour most people engage in. And in terms of, even if you did that, the distances involved are such that they meet our normal standards, basically. So the distance from the rear of the nearest house to Bellamy from the centre of the window, you can see on this plan in front of you, is 22 metres. From Brearley, from the other house to the left, that what we call plot 3 on this one, to the garden of Brearley, notwithstanding the trees on the boundary, is far in excess of the sort of distances that we would expect privacy to be maintained at. Members will be familiar with the 21 metres, and that's where properties are facing directly square on, back to back. Here we've got an acute angle, in fact we've got a perpendicular angle. So we didn't refuse the previous application on the grounds overlooking. This is no worse, and I think it'd be unreasonable for the council to now object to overlooking a loss of privacy for a scheme which is identical in that respect, or if not better, than the one we've already dealt with. So there were two reasons for refusal. There were the proximity of the nearest house to Wycombe, that's here, and that's been reduced, and there was a highway reason to do with effect on the conservation area, which the applicant addressed, because what he's saying in a nutshell is that the alterations of the access are already required for these two houses on the left hand side of the screen, and to refuse this application on the grounds that the alterations required here are harmful is a nonsense, because they're already required by the houses which are already nearing completion. So that's all I'll say for now, Chairman, but I'm obviously happy to try and help with any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I now invite Mr. Cameron McEwen to speak on this item, please?
We strongly object to this application. The refusal by the Planning Committee was very clear in its reasons, and we would have expected any resubmission to have addressed these reasons in full. Despite it being a key part of the reason for refusal, there has been no change to the proximity and siting of the proposed property at all. It remains directly in front of all of the rear windows of our home. The footprint is actually larger than that which was refused, and the stretch across the back of our property would also increase. The proposed development is still overbearing and would have substantial unacceptable impact on our mental health and the amenities of Wickham. With the elevation included, the property would be nearly 8 metres high in comparison to Wickham. This in no way reduces the detrimental impact it would have on us. It would stretch the entire length of our home and would be incredibly oppressive to Wickham. The development would have an enclosing effect in what is otherwise a largely open setting. The level of harm caused to our living conditions would be unacceptable due to the sheer scale of the proposal. It would be excessive in its height and width for a proposal placed directly along the boundary that forms the immediate backdrop of our home. The council inferred that a single-storey building would be more appropriate. What is being proposed is a two-storey house with a height nearing 8 metres high. The use of the term chalet bungalow is grossly inappropriate. What bungalow has 4 large bedrooms, 2 bathrooms and ample hall space on its first floor? The floor space on the first floor virtually being the same as that of the previous refused proposal. There are examples of chalet bungalows sited directly behind the Greystone site on Coppins Lane. There is quite clearly a vast difference between those properties and that which is being proposed to go directly behind us. In short, the proposed dwelling at Plot 4 would, due to its scale and height, and its siting close to the site boundary and directly in front of the rear windows of our home, would result in an overbearing structure which would have an unacceptable impact on our amenities, quiet enjoyment of our property and our mental health in a manner contrary to policies CP4 and DM14 of the Swale Borough Local Plan. We urge you to refuse this application as the grounds for the previous refusal still apply. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I now invite James Batson, please, to speak on this item?
Good evening, members. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, loud and clear, thank you.
Thank you. The basis of this application is to satisfactorily address the reasons for refusal on application reference 21-504571. There were 2 reasons for refusal which members are aware of and will recall. Members will also be aware that this application follows the submission of an appeal to the Planning Inspectorate for the previously refused application, and which a partial claim for costs has been requested. The applicant has proactively sought to reduce the impact on neighbouring properties, reducing the mass of Plot 4 from a 2-storey flank wall to a single-storey pitched roof, sloping away from the boundary. We consider that this reduction in height is substantial and significantly reduces the perceived impact on neighbouring properties, notably Wycombe. The eave height of Plot 4 has been reduced from 5 metres to 2.2 metres, and the ridge height has been reduced from 8.6 metres to 7.2. Alongside this, the topography of the site has been reconsidered, and Plot 4 has a reduced ground floor finish level of 300 millimetres from the previous application. We believe that these changes also satisfactorily address the siting of the property as a reason for refusal, as this effectively renders the flank elevation adjacent to Wycombe as a single-storey element. Planning officers previously stated that the guidance separation distance of 11 metres has been exceeded, and it's noted that this distance is approximately 1.2 times the suggested distance. Members may consider that a proposed 6-foot boundary fence would also ensure that the privacy of neighbouring properties would be secured. It's acknowledged that Swale currently has a shortage in housing land supply, and sites such as these provide effective use of land within the development boundary, and still to a relatively low dwelling to hectare ratio. These sort of sites all assist in the council making up its current shortfall. We also highlight that this site has an approval for 3 dwellings already, and the proposals account for only 1 additional dwelling. For clarity and transparency, we consider that the second reason for refusal was a misunderstanding of the previous application. The requisite sight lines and widening of the entrance to the site were previously approved under application reference 17-504348, and there were no alterations to the entrance to the site from that which has previously been approved. The only changes to access relate to an increase in the road width within the site to accommodate a fire tender, and this is from 3.1 metres to 3.7. The entrance to the site remains unchanged from previous approvals, and we therefore consider that the impact on the conservation area remains unchanged. The increase in traffic is considered de minimis on the basis that there is a planning approval for 3 dwellings, and the uplift in traffic by 1 additional unit is calculated to be 2 trips per day, and we do not believe that this should be considered as significant. In reflection of the points previously made, we would be grateful if members of the committee reconsider this application site and the previous reasons for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I now invite Councillor Mike Baldock, please, to speak on this item?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, loud and clear. Thank you.
Thank you. First, I'd just like to say that I don't think it's really accurate to say that the comments don't recognise the change. Most of them do refer to it still being too imposing. That is, they do reflect the fact that the height has changed. So it's not true to say that they ignore the changes. And I'm quite disappointed to hear an officer describe residents' concerns as nonsense. I'd rather we didn't go down that route. Now, it's quite clear that this was rejected in the last meeting because of the impact on the neighbours. I don't think the changes significantly address that. I welcome the clarification at the front, and I'd ask that a condition be added for if the planning committee isn't minded to give permission, but a condition is added for the retention of the wall and the planting. They say there's no intention to remove it, so there shouldn't be any objection to that. But I do feel this is the change is effectively immaterial in the impact it's going to have on the neighbours. And I'd really say that if we're going to allow this and having refused the previous application, then, and we've heard from the applicant, they're going ahead with an appeal and an appeal for costs. I would suggest that if we give permission for this, we are effectively saying that it will be used against us in the appeal. So I think we have to bear in mind that the change is so small that it's effectively nullifies the the change itself. So I would urge the committee to stick with what they did before, stick with the fact that the impact is too large, it is too great on the neighbouring properties, and all they had to do was submit a bungalow. Not a chalet bungalow, but a single bungalow. It would address the issue of the housing supply that's being put forward. They could have done that quite easily, and there would have been no objection at all. So I really think that this is a sensible place for a bungalow. A bungalow would be the the sensible option. We need bungalows. We have a shortage of them. We have a shortage of housing for the elderly. A bungalow here would be absolutely perfect. A chalet bungalow is effectively a fancy 2-storey house, and it's still going to have a great impact on the neighbours. So I would urge members of the committee to stick with what they said and to reject this and make it clear that we would accept a bungalow, but not one this height. And I would urge members to consider the addition of that condition regarding the maintenance, the retention of the front wall.
That's your 3 minutes. Thank you,
Chairman.
Could I now invite Councillor Nick Hampshire, please, to speak on this?
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate that the developer has come back with a revised scheme that, on the face of it, it could be argued that it's not as high or as overbearing. However, I would argue that the addition of 3 additional properties on this site to the one that's already there is actually overdevelopment. And the fact that they had permission for 3 properties and are now trying to go for another one, it just means they're trying to push their luck, in my opinion, and squeeze too much into too small a space. The back of the property clearly is going to have a greater impact on the footprint to Wickham, and I think the acceptance of a need for a new 6-foot fence highlights the fact that there are going to be privacy issues and overlooking issues of the new dwelling that is being proposed. Reference was made to the entrance and exit points to the dwelling. There has been like a removal of a wall, and I think with the recent falling of the trees in the storms actually does highlight the fact that that bank is potentially unstable, and the need to widen it possibly could make it more unstable in the future. And with the parked cars that are often opposite that junction, I really do question the safety of the additional cars that are going to be going in and out. I don't accept that the additional dwelling will just lead to 2 movements. It's more likely to lead to 4 to 6, because a 5-bedroom home will have 2 to 3 cars, not 1. So personally, I think it is out of keeping. It is overbearing. It is has a negative impact on the residential quality of the existing neighbours, and I personally feel that it doesn't have or will never achieve the sightlines necessary to make that junction perfectly safe. It is not like the Rise, which has 4 or 5 dwellings on it with a very clear sightline. This is on a hill without a clear view to the left and half the carriageway often blocked. So I think there are good grounds, personally, to maintain the refusal that you accepted before, and I would urge the committee to vote against accepting this. But equally, I don't feel the committee should actually have the threat of an appeal waved over it to go against turning a decision which was made in good faith previously. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now move the officer recommendation. Thank you, Councillor Jays. Councillor Winkles.
Thank you, Chair. I did attend the site visit. Yes, the concerns of the profit has been mentioned tonight, very close to the residents. The fact is that the developer has listened and made some modifications is encouraging, but I also feel like the previous 2 speakers or the first speaker that if they'd gone with a bungalow, it would have certainly lowered the height significantly more. And as it stands, I have great reservations to support this application coming back as it is. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hunt, please.
Thanks, Chair. I will listen to one of the ward members, what they said there about stick with what we said last time. And last time I thought that this should be approved, so I will stick with that. I do think it should be approved again. I can't see that there's any reason to refuse it. It does show that the applicant has listened, and what has been said there about still with the concern of the size of it, it has been lowered, and what we do need to remember is that officers were recommending beforehand that it was still acceptable. So this is how we can then sort of go and say that this is still unacceptable when it has been lowered. It's what impact even that height has on it. And do know that 8.10, saying the first floor window within the roof slope is for a bathroom, and we do have to consider that. We've had applications before where if it's a living room and you've got more people in there during the day, there's more impact because they're there more most of the time. And that a condition has been put in that the sill height is at least 1.7 metre above finished floor level, so you're not going to have anyone looking out that window. So that sort of negates any concern about any windows there, and in my view, makes it what would be a bungalow. You haven't got roof, you haven't got windows there that are looking out. I think what we do have to think of, I know that we shouldn't be considering what appeals there are, but I think sometimes you need to make these decisions that what is actually better for the residents. I think what we could end up with is a situation if we turn this down, we'd also lose the appeal, and what the developer will then go and do is build those houses that they didn't want in the first place. And this is a much better thing to have control and let the developers go ahead and build something that's not going to be as harmful to what people would think. So I think this is the better of the two if you're going to choose between them. And I think approving it tonight is better for the residents, which sounds a bit strange to say, but you could end up with something that they really don't want.
Thank you. Councillor Dender, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I agree totally with Councillor Hunt there. I do have one question. The accepted distance rear to rear is 21 metres, as I understand, normal plan. But of course, we're side on here, so it's not rear to rear. So maybe I can ask the officer, Graham, how that pegs out with Wykenham being on the right-hand side there. It doesn't mention the length of their garden to the side of Plot 4. So that's a question. But I agree with Councillor Hunt that I can't see really solid material planning considerations that will succeed or that will turn down an appeal. I can't see that there's any strong reasons that the appeal will not succeed. So I'm inclined to, the only one is this distance that I'm trying to get to. So I'm inclined at the moment that I would approve it. I think, as Councillor Hunt says, if the appeal loses, you'll end up back with the one that you didn't want. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Thomas, could you help us with the distances?
Well, I must admit, I'm not quite sure what Councillor Dendo was asking about, because there are 3 or 4 distances specified on the plan on the screen, and I hope you can see those. I've tried to make it larger so that you can read those in.
Sorry, perhaps I can get him to ask you directly.
Well,
yeah, sure.
If you could rephrase the question, yeah.
The distance from the side of Plot 4 to the rear of Wykenham.
Well, according to the plan in front of you, it's 13.186 metres. This middle dimension here is from the rear of the extension to Wycombe. Obviously, it's longer to the original part of Wycombe here, but the garden here is 10.6. This is 13.2 nearly. As I say, the standard distance, we'd normally try to maintain 11 metres to a 2-storey frame wall in this position. So in theory, we'd approve the 2-storey frame wall just about on the other side of the red line. But here we're 2 metres further, and it's a single story. Is that helpful?
Yes, thank you. Of course, that's a total of 15 then, if I'm understanding you correctly, 15.18.
No, it's 13.18.
No, to the side of Plot 4. To the side of 4.
This is a 13.18, which I'm trying to circle for you now.
Yeah.
It's between this point here, which is the rear of the extension to Wycombe, and the flank wall of the new house.
Okay, thank you.
Is that what you're after?
Right here. Yes, that is exactly, which of course is 8 metres below what we would normally ask for rear to rear. Okay.
Well, that's if
this
there are
is
bedroom
side
windows.
to rear, which I understand.
That's right. If there are bedroom windows facing the rear of Wycombe, then we'd expect 21 metres. But here we've got a side elevation with 2 ground floor windows. We don't maintain that distance on, and they're in the report to be obscure glazed and fixed in any case. And a bathroom roof light, which is this one here, with a sill height condition of 1.7 metres, which Councillor Hunt just referred to. So that's simply a bathroom roof light, that one.
Thank you. The other point, the final point I was going to make is I think I heard the speaker saying that it was still 8 metres, but if I read the report right, it's actually 7.2 metres. He said it was still 8 metres high to ridge height. In fact, our report says 7.2. Could you confirm that, please?
Yeah, the architect's design and access statement and the plans he submitted, because we've checked those ourselves, do indicate that the height of the new building will be, I think, 7.25. It's in the, I think it's in the report.
That's in the report.
I think it's in the report. I'm just wanting to make sure I don't mislead you. 7.2. It says in paragraph 2.2 on the 4th line, the overall height of the plot 4, the nearest one, is 7.2 to the top, the highest point, which is this ridge line here. Or in terms of that elevation, if I can just if I can just move it to the position where you can. Sorry, this jumping about a bit. I need to get the right place. So this point here is 7.2. And you can see it's 8.6 before. Let's come down by 1.4 metres at this point.
Councillor Bonney, please.
Yeah, when you're talking about it's down to 77.2, that's to the ground level for plot 4. That's correct, isn't it?
Yes, and that's reduced by 300 from before. So
okay, but
that's an addition.
That plot level sits higher than the existing property. Is that correct? Because it's on a hill.
It does. The whole of the the whole of the land rises to the west. Yes.
Yeah. So I think my concern is that side to the back rear of the existing property. So that's the best part of what, 30 feet. If you've got that garden there, and I was just looking at my map, the sun sets in the west, which is the other side of this new development. And you're going to have, when that sun goes down, it's going to go down much quicker in that garden. So presumably they're going to lose an awful lot more light into their garden with this mass that sits above them. Whether it's got windows or not is irrespective. It's the residential amenity, not just of the property, but I would say for the garden area as well. And that's quite a considerable mass to sit above it at a higher level, and there's still 7.2 meters onto that higher ground level. You know, I've listened to this. I wasn't party to any of the previous discussions or decisions on this site, but I do know a little bit of the area, and I know there's some bungalows up the hill which are bungalows, not chalet bungalows, and I am concerned that I think feels to me too close, and it's massing, thinking about where the sun would set. So, can you give us some comfort on the amenity, the residential amenity for that existing house?
Mr. Thomas, back.
Well, as I have said before, the council's normal approach is that if there's a house with rear-facing windows, let's call them, or sometimes front-facing windows, normally to the rear, and someone wants to build a house or even a two-story extension where that would be to the rear of those windows, if there's a side-on house, for example, we would normally seek to maintain not less than 11 metres between those rear windows and the side of the house. Now, this is 13.1, and it's a single story. So that 11 metres is a council standard which has been, well, informal use for many years. Now, there's a more formal industry standard, which is called Building Research Establishment Daylighting Standards, which the residents pointed to last time. And that is effectively a formal way of doing the same thing, but it involves measuring the height and the height of the ground level, things like that. And that comes up with these rainbow-like lines on this particular plan. And essentially, it takes a 25-degree upward slope from the window and says, is that 25-degree upward slope affected by the building being proposed? Now, on the previous application, you can see from the red silhouette there, the red dotted silhouette, there was a very minor effect on the very top of the roof where the hip end was potentially cut by that, but it didn't affect the wall. And this 11 metres, we would have approved this wall basically on the boundary, it's called our own standards, and this was slightly further, and it very slightly clipped it. But now you can see it's by reducing the height of the ground and the height of the building, there's no effect on these rainbow lines. And I think that we wouldn't be able to argue that there's any evidence based on standards which are applied across the country, but not generally used in Swale, because we tend to use our local view, which is actually a little bit worse normally. It can be worse. This meets that industry standard more than what you'd expect. It's not even close, you might say. So I think we're going to hide into nothing to say that the overshadowing here is unacceptable, given it more than meets the sort of recognised industry standard.
Okay, thank you. Members, anybody else? Okay, we'll take this one to the vote then, please. Those in favour of the officer recommendation for approval? Okay. Those against? And abstentions? So that's 10 for, 5 against and 1 abstention, no abstentions. So permission is granted subject to issue of the decision notice. Thank you, members. We now move on to item 2.5. And this one is 21/505769 full. And it's the land to the south of Chequers Road, Minster. And I'll thank the officer for an outline and any update, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. First of all, if I can just draw members' attention to the tabled update. Firstly, members will note that there's a procedural update, which is essentially that the application site, as you can see on the plan here, is outlined in red. When an application is made, if an applicant controls land that's not part of the application but is adjacent land, that is shown in blue. That hadn't originally been shown, so the drawings have been updated to include the blue land. And members will also note that I am recommending a further condition to the list of conditions, which is to remove permitted development rights to enlarge the roofs of the proposed bungalows on plots 6 and 7, which we'll come to in a minute. In terms of the application itself, it's a full application for the erection of 7 dwellings, and that consists of 5 detached dwellings, excuse me, which are 2-storey dwellings, which are situated in the southern section of the land, and 2 bungalows in the northern section of the land, which are here. The site itself, if I go back to the location plan, it's not very clear actually. Let me just see if I've got. Yeah, let's use this one instead. So this is essentially the application site here. This triangular shaped plot of land here. It's, as you members can see, it sits just below this red line here. This red line here, which denotes the built confines of Minster, and this area of land here has recently been developed with 9 new dwellings. This land here is Danedale Stables, and members will recall a couple of committee meetings ago that permission was granted for 5 detached dwellings on that land as well. I'll just go back to the plan again and move on from there. Okay, so the site itself, it already benefits from outline planning permission. I can show members that. This is an indicative layout, but it was allowed on appeal by the planning inspectorate on the basis that although it's outside the built confines, it was essentially well related to services and facilities in Minster and had limited harm to the character and appearance of the countryside. So essentially the difference between the indicative scheme that is shown here and the application that we now have in front of us is that the 5 dwellings shown at the southern end, they've been shunted slightly back into the site, and that has provided the ability to accommodate these 2 units here. And they're designed as bungalows because of the relationship in particular with the housing development here to the north that's taken place, to ensure that that relationship is acceptable. Officers consider that the site has the capacity to accommodate the 2 additional units without further harm, and it would make a small but still important addition to boost our housing supply in the borough, hence the recommendation for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I now invite Parish Councillor Dolly White, please, to speak on this item?
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear, Dolly, thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much for hearing what the Parish Council has to say this evening. It should be quite short. Minster Parish Council have supplied Minster Parish Council have supplied a thorough response to this application. I'd like to draw your attention to the following repeating issue that residents would like commented on. The Minster area only only has recently lost a vital GP surgery, with 9,500 residents having to relocate, some off the island, to find basic health support. I only add this to support the parish council's claim that both the infrastructure in this area cannot cope with the developments and the residents' obvious recurring concerns regarding it. This is also very much highlighted on a massively overburdened road system around the parish, very much including the application area. We are not looking for special consideration, but the application of common sense, in that our roads are full to overcapacity, which has been proved time and time again. And we also have the seasonal nature of the island's holiday season to consider the needs of the residents that are growing increasingly concerned that they have very little input into their own community and very little access to the infrastructure like safe roads and healthcare because of the massive overdevelopment of the area. These concerns may hold very little weight here tonight, but this further shows how the planning system does not fulfil the needs of the local population, who at the end of the day have to live with the outcome of your decisions. And I appreciate that everybody's given up their time tonight, but I'm very proud tonight to make this response based on what residents have asked me to bring forward tonight. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Councillor White. Could I invite Mr. John Collins, please, to speak on this item?
Thank you, Chairman, councillors. You've got a very full report in front of you, and I know that many of you will have seen this site before at a previous site visit, so I'm going to be pretty brief. As the officer's report states, the site has been considered acceptable previously, albeit for 5 properties at that time that were illustrated. What I would say to you is that when we were looking at reserve matters, we realised that a 0.4 hectare site, which is about an acre, 5 really wasn't using it to its potential. What we've presented, it literally is 7 dwellings per acre, which many of you will realise that is still a relatively low density. When we looked at the scheme, we did have a series of toing and froing with your officers during the application processing, and there were changes made to improve the spacing between what are the 2-storey properties on the southern part of the drawing. And I think that has assisted and helped actually opening up that part of the site. I heard a comment before about bungalows being considered valuable by the council, and you'll note that the 2 additional ones are actually relatively small scale bungalows that are entirely suitable to meet the needs that you were alluding to earlier. Chairman, it is a small additional contribution to housing needs, but I would advocate trying to use sites that are already committed to their full potential, and I therefore commend the report to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now move the officer recommendation. Could I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Jace. And would you like to speak first, as it's on your patch?
Thank you, Chair. I must concur with my parish council. This is over-intensive development. This is in the open countryside. This is outside the built-up boundary. Where will the line be drawn? Planning keeps adding on more and more housing between villages. Sheppey won't have villages soon. It'll be one big gridlock mess of housing. The island already comes to a standstill with road closures or traffic lights, with infrastructure failing, whether this is water mains, sewage pipes, gas or electric infrastructure. I cannot see how this development enhances the biodiversity of this site. Will the residents see a doctor or a dentist? What is the current 5-year supply? It says we do not have it, but when was the last time this was reported to members? This is one of many applications we are likely to see in the next year, chipping away at the edge of Minster. I've called at least 4 that will have impact on Elm Lane, which is just to the west of this site. Just remember, this would be refused by officers if it wasn't for this government's inflated demand for housing in our borough and the Developers Charter, the National Planning Policy Framework. I think we should have a swale condition like a Grampian condition, then till the supply of docks in the borough reaches the national average, no further housing should be built.
Thank you. Councillor Bonney, please.
Thank you. Can I just ask a couple of questions? So I just want to check the height of the bungalows. Are they the pitch, the maximum height of the roof? Is that capable of being converted later on? Because I think what this committee would like to know is that if it's agreeing to bungalows, that they stay as bungalows. There is an enormous demand for bungalows, but what happens is because the roof height is high enough, it gets converted at a later date. And the second point is this is a small cul-de-sac and KCC as such don't comment on the design and layout of the cul-de-sac. That is our responsibility. Can we be assured that the turning circle that is there, our refuse freighter, is going to be going down there to pick bins up, but also can turn around, and what parking restrictions will be in place in those turning circles to ensure they're not blocked by visitor or resident parking? Because this will be private land and as such will have to be privately enforced.
Okay, could the officer answer any or all of those questions, please?
Yeah, certainly. In respect of the point about a bungalow staying a bungalow, the tabled update and my recommendation for the additional condition, you'll see, prevents the ability to insert dormer windows or other openings. I mean that condition, excuse me, is recommended primarily to ensure that the relationship with neighbouring properties is acceptable. But of course, you know, that in itself will mean that they can't convert the roof to habitable accommodation without permission from the council. So, you know, that ability lies within our control. In terms of the ability to manoeuvre a refuse vehicle, if I can draw members' attention to paragraph 6.2 of the report, and those are the KCC Highways comments, and you'll see the paragraph in italics, which states that tracking for an 11.4 metre refuse vehicle has been provided and that is deemed to be acceptable.
There are parking restrictions to ensure that that's not blocked.
Yeah. I mean, if restrictions are required on a public highway, then that's not a matter that the planning system would deal with. That would be under a traffic regulation order through Kent County Council.
This won't be adopted though, so we are the only ones that can impose that as a condition. So it's a parking management setup.
So if it's not adopted, I suppose we have the ability under a condition to require the turning areas to be marked in some way. In terms of how that is enforced, obviously, you know, there is an issue there, but we could require some form of marking as part of the hard landscaping details to do that.
Yeah, so I think if we're to approve it, I think I'd like to see that condition appropriately worded, a delegation to officers to word something. Just to come back on the height thing, so I'm pleased about the window restriction. Yeah.
Yeah, in terms of that delegation, it might be advisable for us to take a view from the parking team, because I'm not convinced that that would necessarily be enforceable. Being a private street, normally the maintenance and stuff falls to the residents. Street nameplates, lighting, and so on and so forth. The borough council, county council have no involvement in that sort of stuff at all. So I'm not sure. Although we might require painting of some lines on the road, and if that doesn't happen, we may have an enforcement case, but I'm not sure that we could then actually enforce the ability of people to prevent parking on those lines.
So this comes up time and time again, and we talked specifically at Stones Farm was an application which is much bigger, but it was down to having a parking management policy, and that it was imposed as a service provision, I suppose, on the estate management. But this, and we have to be clear here, is we can't be responsible for it. But if we are giving planning permission, we need to prove or need to put in place a structure so that people aren't parking in turning bays. We're going to have loads of delivery drivers turning up for these properties, and okay, it's only a small development, but you're going to have, you know, lots of activity of daily life, you know, food deliveries and all sorts. If people can't turn around, it will become chaos. And I think as a responsible planning authority, we have to take that into account in our planning decisions.
Yeah, Mr. Byrne, please.
Yeah, if I could just further add, if members can note the site layout plan that's shown at the moment, they'll see that parking is, in, you know, by modern standards, fairly generous within development. A number of the plots have 3 dedicated parking spaces. Some have garages as well, which members know generally aren't counted by us as parking spaces, but, you know, do provide additional space there. So it's certainly at the upper end of our parking standards in terms of the supply of spaces. So I wouldn't raise any immediate concerns that there's likely to be parking overspill in the road itself, given the off-street car parking that is actually being provided.
So last point on that is that is a busy road. It's a narrow junction, and what the last thing we want is loads of bins stacked out the front because the bin lorry can't get in and turn round. We don't want him reversing on that road. So I think it's to make sure that there is a safe exit road for any large vehicle going in there. They can turn round.
I think with a condition, we've probably done everything that we can possibly be seen to be done, to be fair.
Yeah, just finally, I think perhaps the way to deal with this by a condition would be to require a parking management strategy, and then we can thrash that out in more detail when those details are provided to us.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dender, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just touch quickly on that. I agree with Councillor Bonney on the turning and making sure there's an area. But I've also had several cases that we cannot enforce on a private area, but marking it out would be good. The other point I would make on the narrow entrance or exit, our contractor, Biffa, of course, can refuse to go into there if they can't come out in the forward gear. So it's up to Biffa. They would turn around and say, no ways are we going in there if we don't have clear access. So I think that's another thing with Biffa. My concern looking at this diagram here, though, and I'm always concerned when suddenly on appeal, non-determination in this case, it wasn't refused, it was on non-determination, suddenly the housing goes up. And this is so common. And that one in the corner concerns me. I can see quite clearly that you can fit the 6th one in, but that 7th one, I'd like a bit more explanation about, because it looks so crammed into that corner. I presume that little square I can see is 1 parking space. How many bedrooms is it? And how close is it to that boundary of the rear of the other estate? That looks very, very close to me. I don't like the look of that, but I might, if there's a better layout, I might be able to suss that.
I'll zoom in and see if that makes things slightly easier to see on the plan. Probably not, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, if I show the actual floor plans for that plot, members will see that, again, I'll zoom in, members will see that it's a 2-bed unit. Here we go here. So it's got an open plan, living, dining and kitchen area and 2 bedrooms. In terms of standards, it meets the national space standards for a 2-bed unit. and the rear garden is, again, in our view, an adequate size. Oh, sorry, wrong plan. Is an adequate size for the property, and in terms of parking, there's space there for at least 3, possibly 4 vehicles
in tandem. How far is it from
that boundary there? It's a gap of a metre, and to the property here, the 2-storey element of this property, which doesn't include that return there, that distance from there to there is 11 metres.
So just.
But of course, we're talking about a bungalow rather than a 2-storey building. So if we go back to the elevation plan for the bungalow, just zoom back out again. No, actually, go there. So that's essentially the flank that the neighbouring property will face towards. So obviously it's 1-storey with then a pitched roof that pitches away, or a hitched roof that pitches away from the neighbouring property.
Okay, thank you. Members, anybody else? Councillor Beard, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Similarly to the comments on Bartlett's Close earlier, I think this is one where it's already got the principle of development. The principle of development is in place. That can't be changed, and those 5 dwellings practically have planning permission, slightly different layout compared to what was on the indicative plan outline, but that is what they've come back with. So I will stick to what's on it. My question originally was going to be about the amenity space of the bungalow, the one in the corner, not plot 7. But I think when Mr. Byrne spoke and when he zoomed in, I think it's clearer when you actually see the plot up close. It's not an amazing sized garden, but it does meet standard. I was concerned also, and I will congratulate officers, that in 2.4, the application originally sought permission for 9 properties. I think you can see from that drawing you weren't going to fit another 2 in there. And I think we've kind of got to the point that we're at. Also, applicants that listen, when we looked at the site next door and it was 5-bedroom dwellings and we refused it, and we mentioned about bungalows, they came back with an application for 5 bungalows. The applicant here has listened that there's a need for bungalows, and rather than try and put another 2 5-bedroom houses in there, they put in 2 bungalows. So I really think we're at a point where if there was an attempt to refuse this, the grounds would be incredibly weak, and I can't see us having any joy at appeal. We've already lost a non-determination appeal on this one. We gave an indicative where we wouldn't have accepted it if it came to us, and it still wasn't accepted for the reasons that were put forward. So I think there's only one way this is going, frankly. It's either going to be approved this evening or it's going to be approved at appeal. And I think if it's approved at appeal, this council is going to go get costs awarded against it for being unreasonable. As much as I dislike that, it is what it is.
Thank you, Councillor Bonney.
Last point. Okay, I do remember when we sort of all trampled across this site, it feels like many moons ago, that there were significant and substantial trees on this site that have been felled. Now, I don't know if there's any TPOs, there's no commentary on here, but I see there's a condition, or you talk about soft landscaping. I hope that soft landscaping, and I would like to see something put in to say that it is substantial and it's native tree planting. Because they were obviously removed with the view to development, but they were, as I remember them, tree trunks like this, which to my mind would have probably been protected at some point, but we obviously hadn't at that point.
Okay, thank you. Members, I don't see anybody else indicating. We'll take this one to the vote then. Those in favour of the officer recommendation? As amended, of course, yes, with the conditions, yeah. Those against? and abstentions. That's 10 for and 5 against, so permission is granted, subject to the issue of the decision notice. Members have got one heck of a long agenda tonight, I appreciate that, but I'd just like if we kind of take a 5-minute comfort break. I think it's appropriate. It gets us a chance to stretch the legs, get the brains back in gear as well. And so if we say literally 5 minutes for returning. So that'll be 8:36 the latest. Right, members, thank you very much. And we'll now reconvene. And we're going to do that with item 2.8, please. And that's 16/508602/out. And that's land at Preston Fields, Salters Lane, Faversham, Kent. And I thank the officer for an outline and any update, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just trying to share my screen. Just bear with me. I'm not quite sure where it's. There we go. As if by magic. Members will note the tabled update. In addition, although Redrow had previously challenged the justification for the secondary education contribution as set out in the report, that's at paragraph 9.64 on page 221 of the agenda, they've now confirmed, following clarification from Kent County Council, that they will pay the full amount. By way of a brief introduction, this application benefits from a resolution to approve from the committee in March 2018, and the amount of development proposed remains unchanged, namely up to 250 dwellings. That resolution is an important material consideration that weighs heavily in favour of members resolving to support the application again now. But there have been some changes since 2018. As a consequence of the development now proposed under agenda item 2.9, the total amount of open space to be provided across the local plan allocation is reduced compared to the position in 2018. See paragraph 3 on page 194 of the agenda. However, it's important to note that at least 2.5 hectares of open space will still be provided. See condition 6 of the current report. This level of provision is acceptable, and noting the various conditions recommended, officers are firmly of the view that the grant of permission here will allow a high quality development to be delivered in accordance with the NPPF and the relevant local plan policy. If you just bear with me, I'll show you what's changed since 2018. The plan I've got on this. The plan I've got on the screen in front of you is the layout from 2018. I'll just reduce it so you can see the whole site. And in 2018, what we were looking at, as you can see, is housing on the sort of northern 2/3 of the site and open space of one form or another on the bottom third. But what we've got now is, as you'll be aware, and as I said, we've got item 2.9 on the agenda, which proposes 70 houses in the blue land towards the southern end of the site, which I'll just try and get on the screen for you. In this blue, approximately this blue area here, 70 houses to say under item 2.9 proposed. So the total amount of open space is reduced, but as I said in the introduction, the amount of open space proposed is now still considered to be acceptable, and we'll get a minimum of 2.5 hectares. What I should also briefly point out is under a section 106 that will cover this application and 2.9, we'll be looking to set aside land for the possible future provision of a link road. So we haven't got a planning application for the link road, we're just looking to set aside land for it. And the land to be pinned down under the legal agreement is precise extent and location. We approximately from the blue arrow on the left hand side, coming from Ashford Road and then running across the site up to the boundary of Salters Lane. But as I say, we're just looking to set aside land at this point. We're not looking at a proposal for a road at this stage. So I'll leave it there. I think it's suffice to say officers are firmly of the view that this is an application that should be supported. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I now invite Mr. Joseph Smith, please, to speak on this item?
Yep, thank you, Chair. Hopefully you can hear me in the committee room. Sorry, I couldn't be there this evening.
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. Good evening, members, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. Some members may recall that 4 years ago, in March 2018, this outline application came before committee and received a resolution to grant subject to conditions and signing of Section 106 agreement. However, post the committee, it became clear that officers and members wished that the applicant reserve land through the site in order for a new link road to be provided, linking the A251 with Salters Lane. Due to the location of the red line boundary, the provisions of the framework plan and the costs incurred by the applicant to reserve this land, it was agreed a secondary application would be required to reserve the link road to the south, as well as the principle of further residential development. This second application, as you're aware, is also on the agenda for this planning committee. Due to the change in the circumstances under which this application was previously resolved to grant and the length of time which has passed, the applicant has agreed with officers for this application to be brought back to the committee for members to reconsider alongside the second application. However, I would stress and reiterate that there are absolutely no changes to the application proposals which were previously approved. So just to touch on what Jim was just talking about, that's in relation to the context of the wider site, but as a standalone for this outline application, there are no differences as part of this outline application. I wish to also note that this land is now under the ownership of Red Row Homes Limited, who since acquiring the site in December 2021 have worked tirelessly and cooperatively with your planning officers to ensure the application is supported and delivered in the short term. Equally, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank officers and those involved over the years for their assistance and continued interaction with ourselves and the applicant, as we're all too aware of their demanding workloads and reduced resources. Following this, I'd just like to touch on our request to amend the wording of condition 4, which you'll note in the updated officer report. We are seeking to change the timing restriction on the submission of the reserved matters application. Since acquiring the site, Red Row have begun involving the design and detail of the housing development. They have even undertaken pre-application meetings with the council on this and confirmed their strategy to submit one reserved matters application to cover the whole of the site rather than a phased approach. Whilst we appreciate the officer's view, it is our view that by allowing the reserved matters to be submitted simultaneously with the design code, it will save officers both time and workload by streamlining the efficiency of reviewing our proposals. Our concern with not streamlining this approach is that ultimately it will delay a detailed application being submitted for at least another year and push development of the site beyond the Swales target delivery within 5 years. I'd also like to add that in our experience of managing applications across the country, this is not an uncommon but rather preferable approach for reasons previously stated. Red Row Homes are one of the largest house builders in the UK, and as I'm sure you're aware, are currently building quality homes on 2 sites in the borough. They are also at the forefront of delivering sustainable housing, working towards the future home standards above and beyond adopted building regulations.
Your 3 minutes.
Apologies. Well, thank you for the opportunity to talk. Thank you.
I now move the officer recommendation. Could I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Jace. And Councillor Martin, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think Mr. Wilson has covered the vast majority on this one. Realistically, I would be amiss if I didn't reflect my residents' views first before going on to my own. Residents in this particular area would strongly object on the grounds that it is Grade 1 agricultural land and the potential impact on biodiversity. On the other hand, this is an allocated site that already had a decision to approve from the committee in 2018. Therefore, I can see no way in hell that we could take this and refuse it and win at appeal. We'd be an absolute laughing stock. So I suggest we get on with it unless anybody else wants to add anything.
I've got Councillor Simmons, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I agree with the previous speaker, the ward member, insofar as this is a site which has already got planning permission. I think it's regrettable that it's taken this long to move forward, but that is as it is. It's difficult to consider this site without also talking about 2.9. I'm going to try and have 2 bites of the cherry, as it were. The first thing I want to talk about is on page 175 and 10.12. We've got car park for adjacent residents, coupled with on-street parking restrictions. And I noticed that the plan that Mr. Wilson has put up for us to see doesn't include this car park at the northern end of the site. And I think that having this car park there would be a great improvement for that part of the A2 through Preston, Faversham. It's very restricted there because of the entrance into the development on the northern side of the A2 and the bollards there. It's very dangerous, I think, with parked cars there, and difficult for residents. And I think that the provision of a car park there is very important. And for those people who know Faversham, there is a similar situation at the other end of Faversham in Ospringe, opposite Shearways, where there's a small car park there, which has relieved pressure on parking on the A2. And I think there's an air quality implication as well, because I think if you haven't got parked cars there with vehicles having to stop and start, but having a smooth run through, I think it will improve the air quality there. Now, the reason I've gone on a bit about the car park is I notice although it's in the officer's report, it's not covered by a condition, at least as far as I can see. Mr. Wilson can correct me, but I read through the conditions and I can't see the provision of a car park for adjacent residents as
It's in the 106.
Yeah, and is the 106 in the? Have we got it in front of us?
Page 175.
Right.
First bullet point. No, second bullet point.
Right. So, right. So that is.
Counting is not what it was.
So that is actually going to happen, is it? Because it's not on the plan, and that is my concern. Is that what will happen is that when we get or when the chairman and the ward members come to discuss the Section 106 agreement, that it'll quietly get dropped.
No, it's can I join in? I've joined in.
You are.
Anyway, yeah, the plan is illustrative. So that's Redrow's plan. That's a way of developing the development. The layout may be completely different. What's in the Section 106 agreement is sort of signed into the legal agreement, and they'll have to do it. There'll be a trigger saying before you occupy X number of houses, you provide the car park. So yeah, it will happen.
Do you mind if I join in now, Mr. Wilson? Thank you. I just want to bring our legal officer in because there's a couple of points, Councillor Simmons there. One in terms of extant planning permissions. You just express a view on that bit, and then the 106 bits for us, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. It's my understanding that this does not benefit from planning permission. It has a resolution of the committee to grant. The permission won't be issued until the Section 106 is signed and completed on that basis, of course, subject to any resolution you might make this evening. Excuse me. And on the Section 106 agreement, one of my colleagues is actually dealing with that. And I know, having had discussions with her and another colleague today, that they have been, I think, beavering away is probably a good phrase to use, in particularly this week, on moving the terms of the 106 forward, knowing that it was coming to committee this evening. So in an attempt to make some good progress with that.
My apologies. My use of words was I should have said it was subject to a resolution, subject to
non-required.
Yeah,
I assure you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Winkless, please.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to echo the comments of Councillor Martin. I don't particularly want to see 250 extra houses in Faversham, but it's an dedicated housing site. As Councillor Martin said, if we was to refuse this and turn this down, we'd lose hands down appeal. So I will be going to the opposite recommendation on this one.
Thank you. Councillor Hunt, please.
Thank you. I agree that we've got no reason to turn it down because of the housing. But it is different to what we had in 2018, and I agree that it should have been approved then. I'm going to say now that it shouldn't be approved. There's no policy reason to have this access for the road. Even we're saying that it's land being set aside. Well, we've got to remember that we are losing open space because of it. We haven't got it in policy. This road at the moment isn't going anywhere. We're looking at probably speculative applications coming forwards. We're nowhere near with local plan of coming up with anything in this area. So where is this road going to be going to? And we're getting rid of open space because of it. And until there's something, I think there's a concrete reason why there should be a road through there, we shouldn't be looking at approving anything that suggests it. On page 167, the concept plan that we put forward before, and in the local plan, we have a buffer woodland planting to be provided in transition to the informal open space. And that land at the bottom was retained as accessible natural green space to maintain the rural character. And now we're saying that actually we want to stick a road straight through there and put more houses on that section, which I think is wrong. If it does get approved, what I would like to see is I would want an addition to the section 106, and that is that if this land doesn't come forward within 5 years for a detailed application of that road, that the land is planted as originally considered with a buffer woodland in that area. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wilson, do you want to come back on that one?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good suggestion. Yeah, some sort of cascade that if it's, the road isn't taken by a certain trigger, that option falls by the wayside, and it's either open space or strategic landscaping. I mean, I'm sure it's possible to word something that allows for that situation. I mean, and I agree with the idea that there's an opportunity cost when we were looking at a different set of schemes now with a different balance of kind of benefits and disbenefits, and it's certainly not a perfect proposal.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hunt, please.
I just sort of add then to what I said. I said 5 years, but if I'd say delegate to officers for a suitably worded section 106 to ensure that land by a certain time doesn't come forward, then it is planted as open space or woodland buffer.
Members all happy with that? Yeah, agreed. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Councillor Bonney then, please.
Cheers, thank you. So I suppose just looking at the 278 agreement, it talks about the works in a 2018 report about pavement and a footpath, etc. So I think the problems I've come across before is we agree to 278 works being done, but what we haven't necessarily agreed to is how they're then landscaped. And then KCC duck out of it and say, well, we're only putting grass there, and do something cheap and shoddy, and it looks cheap and shoddy, and Stones Farm, if I'm thinking there. So opposite the development, one side it's beautifully landscaped, but the bit that's under the 278, we cannot for love nor money get KCC to do anything useful or attractive in terms of landscaping. So my plea is, if there is any element of landscaping alongside these footpaths or whatever, is that in that condition, it's a suitable standard that we agree to, and that is properly funded going forward. And I suppose it's back to my old chestnut that I raised earlier, is about enforcement of parking restrictions, and that will come out of the detail because this is obviously outlined, but that there is a suitable provision in there. So you can comment on that. I'll bring you in.
Thank you. Sorry,
And I'll allow Councillor Bonney to bring you in.
I joined in too quickly. Apologies. Yeah, condition 4 is the agent alluded to it. The design code condition includes various things, including like the road hierarchy and landscaping principles and so forth. So we've got a good level of control of that, and possibly in contrast to Stones Farm, most of the section 2718 works are within or immediately adjoining the Red Edge boundary, so they'll be covered by the reserve matters for landscaping. So that'll be an application to the local planning authority. So yeah, we've got a good level of control over getting those details as good as possible.
So I think it goes beyond a parking strategy, doesn't it? It's about more of a provision, because I'm thinking, you know, but there can be places where we don't want people to park. So that's car parking, but it's also about, I suppose, their equivalent of double yellow lines, etc. What did we call it earlier? Their parking management plan. So if we can have one of those, and they come to us, when they come with the detail on the estate layout, is that they come with that, showing us how that's going to be done, because what we find often is it comes right at the very end when everything else is done. It's too late. We can't really analyse it until we, you know, it should all be before us. What was the other thing? Oh, I wanted to talk about energy efficiency on when they come forward with the detail and where we are with that. Because obviously building control standards are changing on the 15th of June, is my understanding. And that's a bit of an uptick, but what are we requiring?
What we've done in both these reports is we've got the condition that was arrived at following the Barton Hill Drive appeal. So that's condition 4, and it gives flexibility for us to agree a package of sustainability stroke carbon reduction emissions that's appropriate at that time. So it's flexible with if standards change. Exactly.
Okay, members, I don't see anybody else indicating, so those in favour of the officer recommendation? Sorry, Councillor Hunt. Those against? Thank you. And abstentions, please. A 13-4 and 1 against, so permission is granted subject to the issue of the decision notice. Thank you. Yes, and suitable delegations, of course. We now move on to item 2.9, which is 21/500766 out. And this is the land at Preston Fields, Salters Lane, Faversham, Kent.
Could I just ask for some clarification, please?
Yes.
It says that the applicant is the Preston Field Land Trustees for 2.9. My understanding was that the applicant is Redrow Homes. Could I just have some clarification, please?
You're correct. I'm not sure how that typo has sneaked in. As per the agent's introduction, he explained that Redrow bought both the.
Thank you, Chairman.
Yes,
I would need to declare an interest if it.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification, Mr. Wilson. Thank you. So we'll get that amended anyway. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not sure who checked my report, but I'll be having a word with him. No, it wasn't him. Right, I've got a short introduction. Thank you. Yeah, so there's the tabled update again. As before, there was this issue about the secondary school education contribution, but Redrow have now agreed that they'll pay it. This development make an efficient use of land, providing up to 70 dwellings in a location that's considered to be sustainable. Among other things, members will appreciate that we've got less than the 5-year housing land supply, albeit 4.6, I believe is the current figure. And as such, there's a presumption in favour of sustainable development. So, although it's the loss of some open space will still have 1.2 hectares at the southern end of the site for a combination of open space and strategic landscaping, and that's considered to be an appropriate level of provision for the 70 dwellings that are proposed. So, as per the recommendation, the tabled update, officers recommend that permission be approved, granted subject to conditions and the Section 106 agreement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I now invite Joseph Smith to speak on this one, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. I'll keep it short. I'm just going to address a couple of comments from the previous application, and thank you for bearing that approval, and just try and preempt a couple of other questions that may come up. So just in relation to the link road, this application is solely going to reserve land for the provision of a future link road. It will not by any means approve the construction of the link road, and it doesn't seek to. And the intention of this potential link road has been an ongoing discussion between the former landowner, the applicant, the councillors and planning officers for a number of years. And so that's the purpose of it today. The idea of reserving it means that as and when it may be required, the council can draw down for the land or another party to do so. This site it was included in the Local Planning Authority's Housing Land Supply Statement dated January 2021. It includes the calculation, the delivery of 70 units on the site, 35 of which are within the next 5 years, which will contribute to your own 5-year local housing supply, which is a requirement in national planning policy for all local planning authorities to maintain. We acknowledge the modest loss of open space. However, our professional view as planners which is agreed with officers, is that this harm, it clearly is outweighed by the benefits of the proposals. One of the councillors previously mentioned about energy efficiency. So you're quite right in that the regulations are changing from June 2023, whereby developers are required to meet a 31% CO2 reduction. Redrow themselves are actually going to be delivering a 65% reduction from the start of the developments. I won't take up any more of your time, but thank you for your time and attention this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now move the officer recommendation. Could I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Jays and Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Chair. As we heard earlier, we do not have a 5-year land supply. We have got to make the most of the allocations that we've got. Otherwise, we're going to have to start allocating even more greenfield space across our borough for housing in the future. So what is already allocated, we are going to have to maximise. In terms of the reason for a land reserve or for a potential link road, there are many reasons that we may at some point in the future wish to have a road of some form there, whether it be a cycle route through the development to enable those living in the south of the town to travel to the Aldi and back out again. It may be that we want to have an alternative route for traffic on the A2 at times when there is heavy levels. Who knows? We don't know what the future holds, but this future proofs that particular development. That's the idea of it. We can't keep going on as we have done in the past of building cul-de-sacs that never allow anything to link on. You have to think, what's going to come in the future? What might come in the future? How can we make it so that what comes in the future doesn't do even more harm? How can we do it so that things work? We have to think in that way going forward if we're going to meet the housing needs of this borough and to meet our carbon targets and to make sure that we're not doing further damage to our residents that are currently here. Obviously, having more housing on a plot is not going to be popular with residents. I understand that, and I do understand the concerns around biodiversity and the loss of agricultural land. But again, this does outweigh that. We are looking at a further 25 affordable units within this patch of 70, or up to an additional 25, perhaps more if there is a use of grant allocation by one of the housing associations for some of this unit. Who knows? So as such, I think the officers are right on this one, and it has my full support.
Thank you. Councillor Simmonds, please.
There we are. Thank you, Chairman. I agree. This is obviously more housing is not necessarily the greatest thing, but it does seem to me that this plot which lies between the application that we've just been discussing and the M2 motorway, it seems to me that it's a sensible use of that bit of land. And I can see the desirability of future-proofing by having a corridor across there. And I think it's a shame that a similar corridor wasn't provided across Perry Court when that was agreed. Although, of course, the land that's been allocated for offices is not, and commercial development has not been developed, so it's still a possibility. However, I think there are some concerns about the potential link road, one of which is the high pressure gas main, which runs through there, and I think that is a concern. It's all very well having an 11-metre wide or 10-metre wide access road, which is serving that particular housing development. But if it's serving a link road, then it's going to increase its usage, and the high pressure gas main may become more of an issue. The other concern is that where that access is between the houses, existing houses, I think the one to the south is called Burnt Island, that comes onto the A251. It is very close to the motorway junction, and I think there is a concern about the amount of traffic that might be coming onto the road there to join the A251. So I think there are concerns about a link road, but I think at this stage we're merely, I think, in my mind anyway, we're voting on the 70 houses with the provision of a possible link road at some time in the future, and I think perhaps that's an argument that will need to be had later on, and not something that we can necessarily decide on here tonight. So I will be voting in favour of the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Hunt, please.
Thanks, Chair. I won't repeat what I said last time, but for the same reasons, the open space there should be retained to keep the rural character. But the link road, again, sort of exactly what I said last time. But if I again say that if can delegate to officers a suitably worded section 106 to come up with a timescale of making open space if the road doesn't come ahead would be good for this one. But that's it.
Thank you. Members, just as previous, do you all concur with that view? Thank you. Councillor Dender, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's a very simple question, actually. I am inclined to approve this, but failing the link road is at the top there between the two coming off the Ashford Road. Before that comes on, what is the access to this part of the estate? What will need the normal access into there? From Salters?
Well, this is an illustrative plan, but there'll be two access points where this road is shown. That is intended to show the link road. That's intended to show one way that an access from the A251 into these two developments could be provided. So yeah, as I say, from that blue triangle. I mean, it's illustrative, so it might not look exactly like that. So there'd be this access at this point, and most of the people go into the 70 houses. You'd have thought more often than not they'd use this access point. But at the top end, of the development, there'd be a second access point from Canterbury Road, where the blue triangle is.
Oh,
and so, you know,
that's the bit I didn't understand. Yeah. The two sites will be linked by a road, because it doesn't really show it there.
Yeah.
So you can go all through the one from the north onto the south.
Yeah, in due course. And the thing to stress is there will be one or more reserved matters application for that. So through that process, we control the specification and, you know, trying to design the road just so it's as sympathetic as possible, etc. But at this point, we just know that there's going to be those two access points, and almost certainly they'll join up at some point in the future.
But I was picking up on Councillor Hunt's point that if the link road does not go ahead, then that access from the A251, yeah, will fall away.
No, because it's part of the Northern application. Okay. The approval includes the two access points.
Okay.
And we actually need it to satisfy KCC highways. They wouldn't want 300 and however many houses worth of traffic all coming out of one or other of the accesses. The advantage of the two accesses, you get a split. So some people want the A2 to go to Port Canterbury, and some people will want the Ashford Road because they want to go on the motorway or to Ashford. But if we only had the one access, I think they'd be more likely to be concerned about congestion.
So the bit that, if the link road didn't go ahead, the bit that you would re-landscape or whatever is on the right-hand side there towards Salter.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Sorry, thank you for the clarification.
Thank you. Councillor Bonner, please.
So the section 106, we'll agree, will apply to this and to the other application. Okay. So I talked about the 278. What does the 278 say about that top junction? Is that going to be traffic lights at the top? Yeah. No. Well, I suppose we still can debate it because the same section 106 that applies to this as the previous one. So if we don't approve this, then, you know, okay, so we've already agreed the terms of the section 106 for the last application, but if we decide we want to change it in this, we can, correct? Because the section 106 is attached to this as well as the other one. Yeah, but what you're saying is the previous decision, we are bound by the terms of the 106 from the previous decision. I'm saying we're not. This is a separate application, and so the section 106 terms that apply don't necessarily have to be the same. You'd think they would be.
Cheryl, can you help us out now?
I think as part of this application, because you're considering a different planning application, there may be matters that arise through the debate from this application you may then wish to add.
Yeah.
But I would suggest that you wouldn't necessarily be able to now go back and take things out.
No.
But I think the other point is that the 278 agreement, I'm not clear because I haven't read the section 106 agreement, apologies, but I'm not sure if that's secured through the section 106 or whether that's secured by condition.
Okay, because what concerns me, so if I float what concerns me, and I probably should have brought it up in the previous application, is that top junction, knowing the A2, how much disruption's been caused by the new junction where they put the traffic lights in, don't know what's that called, the 251. If that's just, I'm not proposing we put more traffic lights in because it's ridiculous along there now. There's so many hold-ups, but that part of that is to do with works for developments. But if you're going to have an awful lot of traffic coming out of there and turning right, I think will be quite dangerous because that is really busy along there. And I'm concerned that actually maybe they should be using the other exit route to go on to the A2 there. I just think that there's so many junctions along there that the risk of an accident is quite great. I mean, we're talking in total here, what, 300 and odd? How many houses we're talking about in total across the two sites? Yeah, so potentially we've got 600, 700 cars coming out of this place in the morning onto the A2. So, you know, I think we've got to think about traffic flows coming into and out of that junction, and are we happy with it? Because that is what we've been asked tonight under the section 106.278 agreements, and we're delegating authority on that.
Can I just try and clarify again? Yes. We've, going back to 2.8, there's a condition 32, which you've agreed to, which deals with with both access points. So you've approved those access points.
Yeah.
Whatever the debate about the 6106. So they're an access point designed like a simple T junction, like I said there, and then another simple T junction there.
But now
are approved.
Yeah. That's fine, but we're adding another 70 houses on top of that, so potentially another 140 of vehicles on top of that.
Yeah.
So it's a cumulative effect. And actually, this is one thing we get accused of as a council. Well, you didn't think about the consequence of this. So, yeah, okay, I understand the theory about adding more to this site. That's quite logical for me. But is the adequacy of those junctions? Are we satisfied and happy with that? With the cumulative effect, another 70 on top of it? I'm concerned, that's all.
Okay. Oh, sorry, I was just going to say, well, they're not here to say it for themselves, but KCC Highways have looked at this afresh, and they're comfortable that the extra 70 can be accommodated. And the other thing is possibly worth just pointing out is this development comes with some developer contributions. One of which went towards the traffic light, which whether you like the new traffic light or not, it does include a phase for pedestrians and cyclists. It also includes a pavement and a cycleway so that you can get from just to the northwest corner of this site. You can now cycle along the new pavement, safely cross the Ashford Road and cycle to the Abbey School. And that's a big benefit. You know, I sort of would happily argue with anyone. That's a big benefit, encouraging people, particularly children, to cycle or walk when before it would have been too dangerous. So, I mean, we're making proportionate steps to encourage people out of their cars. It's not perfect, and a lot of people will still drive, but there are benefits in that regard with this scheme.
Okay, members, anybody else? Okay, we'll take this one to the vote then, please. Those in favour of the officer recommendation? Those against? And abstentions? So 13 for, 1 against and no abstentions. So permission is granted subject to issue of decision notice and the officer delegations. And is there somebody that's just a little bit fitter? Well, everybody's a little bit fitter than me, obviously. Is there anybody that would be prepared to go and tap on the door next door and release Councillor Gold from his suffering? Thank you. He's probably putting his recess in there, I guess. Welcome back, Councillor Gold. Right, members, can we now move on to item 2.10 or item 210? And this one is 22/500641 full, and it's Bank House, Broadway, Sheerness. And I'll thank you for an outline and any updates, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I've got a verbal update for members. If members wouldn't mind turning to the list of conditions in the agenda. Unfortunately, not numbers, yeah. Okay, members will see condition 4 states that the new windows as approved should be constructed in timber, and that was a recommendation by the council's conservation officer. However, conservation have considered this further and have since advised that they would prefer the windows to be constructed in metal frames. And that has been discussed with the applicant, who is happy for that approach. So my recommendation is that the timber frames, the wording in the condition is changed to metal frames. And in relation to condition 3, in addition to the details and samples of the facing and roofing materials for the top floor, which is proposed, the scheme is also proposing works to repair and repaint the render on the building, and I would recommend that we also include some wording there that the details of the render colour finish is included as well in that condition. Turning to the application itself, members can see on the screen, this is the existing building at Bank House in Sheerness. It is a 3-storey building with commercial shop units at ground floor level, which have the likes of estate agents, tanning shop, hairdressers and a gym contained within them, and then 2 floors above, which historically have been used for office purposes. The current top floor has approval under the prior notification process for conversion under permitted development to 10 residential flats, and that was granted earlier this year. The application that we have is to add a further floor to the building in the style of a mansard roof, which can be seen on the drawings here, and that floor will contain 9 flats, a variety of 1 and 2 bedroom units. I'll show a picture of the property itself. This is the building. It sits on a prominent location on the Broadway and Trinity Road. It's obviously within the town centre. It's also within the Sheerness Marltown Conservation Area. Given its location, the principle of potentially extending the building to accommodate residential development as part of a mixed-use development is supported in locational and policy terms. As you can see from the picture, the building's not of any particular merit at the moment, and has a flat roof, and the erection of a mansard roof is considered to give the opportunity to potentially improve the appearance of the building. Although it's in the conservation area and adjacent to the listed Trinity Church, no objections raised by the council's conservation team, and we consider the scale and design to be acceptable and in many ways an enhancement in streetscape terms. There's no vehicle parking provided, but in light of the town centre location, this is considered acceptable, and KCC Highways have raised no objection on that basis. Members will also note that we're seeking delegated powers subject to the receipt of, subject to the receipt of comments from the Environment Agency. We haven't yet received those, but we do not anticipate that they will raise an objection, particularly given that they did not object to the prior approval application for conversion of the existing top floor building, which was only a couple of months ago. But that process, that notification process, is still ongoing. But as I say, we don't anticipate an objection or a concern being raised in that respect. So yeah, the recommendation is delegated powers to approve. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I now invite Councillor Dolly White, please, to speak on this item?
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can get you, Dolly, yeah.
Just before we start, Chair, can I just make a small comment that the application shows that our consultee objection was placed under Faversham Town Council as opposed to Sheerness Town Council. So maybe we could get that adjusted to make sure that obviously the application reflects which councillors made an objection or comment on this application, if that's okay.
Yeah, are you referring to the planning portal?
Yes, I am.
Right, thank you very much, thank you.
Okay, do apologise about that. So the predominant reason that Sheerness has objected to this application is it's felt that the parking for this application has not been fully considered. The parking for the existing businesses that use Bank House already need more parking than is provided to give adequate access to the property and business as it already stands. Within the application, DM7 vehicle parking, Swale Borough Council's parking 2020 parking rules are cited as positives to allow the development to go ahead. From a realistic position, from this document and others in the application, you can quite clearly see that the car park attached to the property will not sustain parking for more units built due to the existing well-used businesses. There is no on-street parking available within a reasonable distance of this application. The main roads that the development leads out upon are all heavily restricted and would indeed be dangerous to encourage residential parking onto, which will be the real-life consequences of this application going ahead as it is. The properties would also not have the capacity to allow disabled parking to increase either on-street parking or in the given car park that is attached to the building itself. With no increases in disabled parking facilities, it's hard to see how basic requirements for the building will be met unless Swale is willing to restrict the use of these properties, which I don't think, which isn't seen as acceptable at all, actually. Sheerness is also very concerned about the access to the property in regards to the existing car park, where would be needed for bin collections and access for emergency vehicles to the building. It is not acceptable that pick-up points for bins will be located along Trinity Road due to its proximity to both Masters House and Trinity Church, which are part of Sheerness's heritage offering in the area. It would also be unacceptable for waste to be stored on public footpaths that become extremely busy and will interfere with a business that operates at the bottom of Bank House. The position of the bin store on the document provided shows that the applicant is expecting to leave bins on the public pavement along Broadway, which will lead to a large amount of congestion on this road for bin collection day, especially as its position is very close to a crossing and time-limited restricted parking that is used by businesses on a very, very regular basis. Congestion in this area is created in this way due to the working day and school traffic, and it being a main access way to Sheerness from Minster. You could see this fairly well from the officer's picture that he used earlier to highlight the building's construction. The only available area where extra parking could be sustained would be in the local pay-as-you-go car park that are heavily relied on by businesses in the area. This is not a long-term solution for this development due to needing permanent payment from residents from the application's units to pay high fees.
3 minutes.
Oh,
Thank you.
I do apologise, sorry.
That's okay, thank you. I now move the officer recommendation. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Jays. Councillor Eakin, do you want to?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've got a few thoughts. The parking's obviously it is a slight problem. But I accept kind of being this close to the station and with the correct bike storage. This is probably one of the locations on Sheppey that we could live without multiple cars. And I know Sheerness Town Council raised concerns about transport, but I do think that kind of an adequate bike store would be a good way to address that. I was kind of looking for a total number of the actual bike places being put in, but I couldn't actually find one. So there's no set amount in the conditions. So would it not be an idea to possibly add a minimum as a condition? Because it is the town centre and bike stores don't kind of last a long time, do they? So that'd probably be at least 9, but if not, oh, there is 9. Okay, right. I didn't see that bit, but obviously there might be more than 9 people actually living in the property, so maybe it actually should be maybe 1.5 per property. I guess the other main points, kind of the height. I know no residents have objected regarding the height, and you know, I think where it is would not really play a detrimental effect on local residents in regards to height. You know, I've got the plans in front of me here. I'd actually go so far as to say the design, kind of on paper, actually looks like an improvement. You know, if you don't want to develop out, which you know no one here does like, you kind of need to go up. And I think in this regards, going up was kind of the way forward. If the town council's concerned regarding kind of amenities, you know, they're valid. But I think the report does kind of address them well. So I am kind of leaning towards supporting the officer's decision. But I know what Councillor White did bring up regarding kind of the bins, because obviously it is the town centre, it is a walkway. And the amount of times that I'm contacted, bins not been collected. So what I don't want is kind of the rubbish kind of playing a part against the local businesses. So maybe where the rubbish store isn't necessarily the best way forwards. So I don't know if we could do anything about that. But as a whole, on this occasion, I'm kind of leaning towards supporting the recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Byrne. Would you like to comment on that? Thank you.
Yeah, just to clarify, a cycle storage area, secure cycle storage area is shown in this part of the development within the car park, which would provide secure covered provision for 9 bikes on the basis of 1 per unit. In terms of the bin storage area, if I slide across here, you'll see that provision for bins is shown in this effectively alleyway between the building and the church, which is a gated area, so that you know they're not on the public highway or spilling out or anything like that. They're shown there in a reasonably secluded area. So our view is that there is adequate bin storage being provided with the development. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Winkler.
Thank you, Chair. Just 2 quick points. I don't think an extra story on this building where it's located would be detrimental to the landscape of the area, and it's 9 additional units, flats, much needed additional housing, possibly for first time buyers in the area. So I think this is a good one to support. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bonney, please.
Okay, grand. Do we have any fire escapes, external ones in this, or how are these accessed?
So there's two main access points, which are the main access points into the upper floors of the building. So there's one from the Broadway,
right,
which you can see the staircase there essentially as it emerges. And then you also have an access point here, which takes you into the, I think it's into the internal car park area, which will serve some other units as well.
So there's no lift to the top floor. So
There's no, as far as I'm aware, there is no lift there. Let's have a look.
I'm just thinking these could never be used by anyone with a disability or a physical disability. They won't be able to get up the stairs to the properties.
Yeah,
So.
I think that's fair to say, yeah.
And so how does that sit within the Disability Act, or us approving something that couldn't be? Because
well, I mean, my understanding is that obviously there are a range of different types of accommodation that are approved through the planning process, and you know, obviously where we can make provision, then you know that is included in developments. But there are sometimes developments that aren't suitable for certain groups.
But what's the total number of flats? So we've been asked 9, and it sounds like so under the PD rights.
There's 10 on the current top floor. They have PD rights to convert those into 10 units, and then we have 9 further units that are proposed here.
So 19 in total.
19 in total.
Oh, that's neat, isn't it? We don't get out of any kind of Section 106 provision.
Mr. Bird, I think I'm right in saying some of the issues raised as well by Councillor Bonney fall more in the building regs. So
exactly. Yeah,
Okay,
exactly. That's right.
So I just wanted to clarify on when you say metal frames, we're not talking crittle frames here, are we? We're talking what I call aluminium.
Yeah, I would have thought
bog standard frames.
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah. I mean, the detail will be subject to the condition. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you'll see, as well as condition 4, condition 5 actually requires the specific window type and design to be submitted to.
Okay. And bearing in mind there's going to be 19 flats, I'm just wondering why it looked like there were individual bins, why it's not a collective bin store, because I just think 19 sets of bins all down the side, potentially each with a green bin and a blue bin. Talking nearly 40 odd bins plus food bins. Would we not be requiring a communal bin store?
It may well be the case that they provide a communal bin rather
Can we condition that? Because I think the main concern from the local residents is that what we don't want to end up is with 50 or 60 potentially bins. Yeah. And also, is there any provision for an electric charging point at all?
Well, of course, there's no car parking provided. So,
no, okay.
No.
Well, although there isn't, you know, it's shared amongst all the properties, isn't it? That parking provision at the back.
Well, that is generally allocated to the commercial premises that operate at ground floor, primarily at ground floor level. So we can't relate the provision of an electric vehicle charging point to this development in question.
Right. Okay. All right.
Shocking.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I've now got Councillor Martin, please.
I suppose you could have an electric cycle charging point, but just to add a new one to the mix, that is just whether or not, as part of the conditions around those bin stores, obviously there's nowhere else to do any biodiversity net gain. Could we have a sedum roof on it? It gives an opportunity there for a little bit, and every little bit does matter.
Well, I think the provision of a sedum roof is quite a considerable change to the development that's in front of us. It's not something that I think we could. Oh, sorry. Right. Okay. Well, I don't know. I don't know whether a bin store would be able to support something like that, but what with sedum roofs? Yeah.
Okay. I've now got Councillor Marchington and then Councillor Dendall.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Been looking at design and quality of the building is very, very good. It's only the parking is the problem, you know. I know you say it's central position, you're not going to need public transport. Well, I think, oh really? They're going to people want to go to drive, you know. The 9 units, you're going to have 9 cars, full stop, you know. I've had a lot of experience in my old town. I've just sold a house down there, and the parking problems is absolute nightmare. There's double parking everywhere, you know. You get people calling the police. There's actually that was going on. And that's the reason why I've got rid of the houses over parking. Some of these people are having to move 4 streets away every night trying to find somewhere to park, and that's what. And the whole area is a complete nightmare for this. So. And so you got a comment on 819 saying it's not unusual for flats in urban locations to have limited or no outside space. Well, this is ancient rules, 40, 50 years ago. There weren't the traffic, it was a different world, you know, and it's different today. So there must be somewhere where they can park at night. Is there anything that can be done allocating to council parking for somewhere where they can go in with a ticket just to get in to somewhere to park overnight? That's all I'm asking. Can it be done?
I think the issue we have is that obviously we take applications to committee that relate to peripheral areas that aren't particularly, you know, perhaps in members' opinion, highly sustainable or well located or so on, and you know we have concerns raised that that people will rely on cars too much, and that we should be looking at encouraging people to develop brownfield sites and in more sustainable locations. And then we get applications in for more sustainable locations, but there's still a concern about parking, and I understand that, and that's natural because parking is often a highly contentious issue that, you know, residents have and members have and so on. But if we don't provide, you know, when we're providing these types of developments in these locations, we can't stop people from owning cars. We can't stop them from parking on the public highway in places where they're allowed to park. But, you know, the kind of sort of reasonable approach to it is that if people are going to buy a property or live in a property that doesn't have a car parking space and they have other options, that there is, you know, there is a reasonable opportunity there that they may not need to rely on a car. And ultimately, you know, those are the sort of approaches that we're trying to encourage, because we're trying to encourage people to avoid, you know, sort of overuse of cars and ease traffic and so forth. And these types of, you know, I'm not saying we're not in an ideal world where nobody will ever use a car if they're in a highly sustainable location, but you know, these types of developments will help encourage that.
Can I come back, Chair?
Yeah, for 30 seconds.
But that is not now. Okay, it's definitely not now, and it's not for the next 10 years. Sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Dender, please.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, but I'm going to come back to these bins. I don't think it was sufficiently examined. You've got this piece by the at the side of the church. Yes, you've got 19 flats. You've got at least, if you're going to have individual bins, you've got at least 19 bins, maybe 38. That's a heck of a lot of bins. If you use shared bins, Eurobins, yes?
Sorry, 9, I thought it was 9 flats, am I?
The ones downstairs, it's 19.
Ah, okay. Never was really good at maths.
So, so you may end up with at the least 19, but possibly 38. Then if you, do they have food bins over there? And then you've got your food bins as well. That's a heck of a lot of bins. Even if you have Eurobins, which we have on a number of flats, areas of flats, you know, the Eurobins are still, what, 11 litre, I think? You're still going to fill up a lot. So that, you know, that concerns me a great deal. But what more concerns me, where's the lorry that takes those 38 bins onto it? Where does it park to take the 38 bins on? Or if they are a Eurobins, where does Biffa actually, with its lifter, go to park to put those bins, and how long is it going to be staying there to get them?
Well, I would
So
suggest
does
that,
it go in the courtyard? I didn't think it could.
well, I mean, there's two options. One is it goes in the courtyard if there's enough space to do that, or alternatively, it uses the Broadway and the access points to bring bins out onto the Broadway and empty them.
So it may be parked on the Broadway. Councillor Beard can advise me a bit on this, but it might be parked on the Broadway for half an hour or more to get those bins out.
Well, I mean, I think it would be similar to every other bin that it empties on the Broadway as well as it travels down the road. I mean, it does that already, and it will stop in various locations on
We
the
just had
Broadway.
38 in one spot. Up to 38 in one
Well,
spot.
I think. Well, okay. So let's just take a couple of steps back here. I do understand what you're saying about the practicalities of each flat being allocated in an individual bin, and as members have already mentioned, the normal approach here with flats is that they use communal bins. So we can certainly impose a condition that says, notwithstanding the approved plans, details of bin storage facilities to be submitted and approved by the council. That would then provide larger bins, which obviously will be able to be emptied quicker than a series of smaller bins.
I'd also, it's not really for this application, but also I have tremendous problems, I'm sure everybody else does, with these kind of Eurobins, the shared bins, yes, of the wrong stuff being put in them continually, all the time. And Biffa, the contractor, refusing to pick them up because they're contaminated. So it's another great worry to me when you've got a load of bins or a load of shared bins around a bunch of flats. It's just a commentary.
Thank you. Councillor Beard, please.
Education time.
The Broadway specialist.
Sheerness still has weekly collections. They have their refuse collected weekly, and they don't have red, green bins and blue bins. They have sacks. So if a communal bin area is provided, there will probably be a couple of communal bins for rubbish and a couple of communal bins for recycling. All of the shop units have their own bin stores and always have done, and the lorry always empties them in the car park, and I have never known it to be a problem. I've known this building for donkey's years, and when it was you've had all sorts in there. Amicus Horizon used to be in there. You had the actual bank on the corner. There used to be a VHS rental store in there. What's VHS? But there is no, as far as I'm aware, there has never been a problem here with emptying the bins. The bins are located down an alleyway, which is accessed from the Broadway, but I think any sensible refuse company would collect from inside the courtyard. You can get a lorry in there, and I have seen it, and having worked on the church next door, I know you can get delivery lorries in there. So actually the location of the bins in the alleyway concerns me because of the people climbing onto them to get onto the church. That said, the bins are currently there anyway, so that's always been that way. On the parking, I think that has been slightly over-egged as well. When this was 2 floors of offices, there were dozens of people working in there, and there's always been that same courtyard with 18 spaces. There's never been enough parking for that building, and actually I think you're going to have less people going into that building when it becomes flats than you did when it was offices. It mentions it in the report, all the roads around there are traffic controlled. Trinity Road has got double yellows on both sides, the Broadway's got double yellows on both sides, apart from the parking bays outside the old post office, which are limited to 20 minutes. So apart from overnight, so some residents might be lucky and park there if they're quick to get out in the morning. But I think that's going to be over-egged. My suggestion would be get rid of some of the cycle bays and put the bin store there, but I don't think that'd be incredibly popular. In terms of the design, I think the design is very good. The additional floor looks much better than what's there existing, and is very similar in design to a block of flats that are in Sheerness High Street, where an additional floor was built on top, and that to a very similar design. So I actually think that would be quite in keeping with Sheerness. The outstanding comment from the Environment Agency, I'd be very worried if they object, because if the floods reach in the 3rd floor of this building, we are in serious trouble. I think this is a brilliant use of the building, and I'll be giving it my full support.
Okay, thank you. Just before bringing Councillor Darby, with your indulgence, members, can I extend standing orders by another 30 minutes? Thank you all very much. And Councillor Darby, you've been very patient.
Councillor Beatts actually said most of the stuff that I was going to say. The only additional thing I was going to say was when it comes to the parking, there's the car park there, obviously, and it's free after 6 o'clock. And I think you'll find that the Royal Mail, Royal Mail use one of the car parks for a lot of their vans. So I couldn't see it being too much of a problem. Yes, I would have grave concerns on the bin stuff, because I just think, yeah, what they're going to, because everything's, we've emphasised everything here on 9. As it's now starting to open out, you're looking at 19 all the time here. So, and it goes the same, what Councillor Martin said about the cycles storage. We're talking 9, and really it should be 19.
Okay, thank you.
If I can just make a point, I mean, obviously, the difficulty we've got here is that we've got the existing top floor, which has been permitted under a completely different regime to a planning application. And under that regime, we're only able to consider certain elements, which don't include things like cycle storage and bins and so on. With this application, we can only consider the development that's in front of us, which is for the 9 flats, not for the 10 that have been permitted under the permitted development. I understand that there is an impact there that's combined, but we can't refuse this application because it doesn't provide enough bin storage or cycle storage for a development that's taking place on the floor below under permitted development. We can only deal with the impacts of the development that's subject to this planning application. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gold, please.
I'll keep it very brief. I just would agree about the need to look at developments that don't have parking, and I think this is absolutely the sort of development that should be approved even in the absence of any parking. Yeah, it must be possible to live without the car, and I think this is a place where it would be.
Thank you. Members, I see nobody else indicating, so I'll take this one to the vote. Those in favour of the officer recommendation? Unanimous, members. Thank you very much. So permission is granted, subject to the delegations and amendments. Yes. Yes. Yeah. And subject to the issue of the decision notice too. Right, members. We now come on to item 211, and this one is 21/500204 full, and it's Old House at Home 158 to 162 High Street, Sheerness. Thank you, for outlining the updates, please, Mr. Byrne.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. If you can just bear with me whilst I try and bring up the drawings. Seems to just be thinking about it at the moment. Okay, so this is a site not a million miles away from Bank House on the High Street. and on the junction with Millennium Way. Contains the Old House at Home, which is a long established pub on the island. And I think the pub closed either just before the COVID pandemic or during the COVID pandemic and hasn't reopened since. And the existing property, I'll bring some pictures up. The existing property, the pub's been there for a long period of time. I think the property was, the original property was built in the late 18th century, early 19th century. And it contains a historic core dating back to that period, but the pub itself has been quite substantially altered over time as well. So there's the property, and the facade is essentially sort of part of the, I suppose, the charm of the original pub, but you have this extension here, and you also have a quite significant alteration to the other side of the building here. And the pub originally was part of a terrace that extended further along the high street and across what is now Millennium Way. And in the 20th century, and then obviously when Millennium Way was built, it was, you know, buildings were demolished, and it became the sort of end property at the junction. It's not in a conservation area, and the pub's not listed. The applicants provided a heritage statement which accepts that there are elements of the pub that have some historic interest, but that overall the interest has relatively low significance, and that viewpoint is also shared by the council's conservation team. So there's no objection in principle to the demolition of the pub on that basis. The application that we have is to demolish the pub and erect a building which is L-shaped and has a frontage onto the high street and onto Millennium Way. It will contain a ground floor commercial unit in this area here, which is shown to be used as a micropub. So the site will continue to have a pub stroke drinking related use. And then the upper floors will be, it's a 3-story building, and the upper floors will contain 7 flats. And during the course, I mean, this application has been with officers for a fairly considerable period of time. It started off life as a larger development and has gradually been reduced to address concerns that officers have raised. And we're now at a situation where it's a 7-unit scheme. In terms of the design, what we have is essentially a curved frontage in the main central core. The elevations are primarily going to be in yellow stock brick, and the building drops down gradually, as you can see on both sides. This is the Millennium Way frontage. The building gradually drops down in scale to a scale that is, you know, sort of relates well to the age concern building next door, which is a 1-story structure. And then on the other side, to again, it drops down slightly in scale here, where it meets, I think that was the former Crown Pub, which is now a takeaway, I think. Officers think that the scheme is well designed and provides good, attractive frontages to each side of the road, and is an acceptable design in what is a very prominent location. And obviously the retention of a commercial unit to be used as a micropub would continue the historic use on the site. as a pub. The reason why officers consider that we need to control the use as a micropub as opposed to a standard pub is that, generally speaking, micropubs tend to have less noise and impacts related to them. They don't normally play music, they don't contain jukeboxes and so forth. You know, that is a better neighbour, in particular to the new residential units that are proposed than a standard pub would be. On that basis, the recommendation is for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I now invite Town Councillor Dolly White to speak on this item, please?
Thank you, Chair. Last one for this evening. Sorry about this, everybody.
Look at you, Dolly.
I do apologise for sound my voice. Apologies. Right. Anyway, Sheerness Town Council has looked at this application and would like Swale to take the following concerns into consideration this evening. The building itself is not a listed building. However, it is the last public house in Sheerness High Street area to operate in this type of historic building, which is part business, part house, if that makes sense to you, to operate in this type of historic building, which is part of the area's character, especially looking at the shiplap exterior and the roofing design, which of course is in keeping with the rest of the high street design. More examples of this sort of building come public house can be seen in the streets and the residential areas of Sheerness, for example, in the areas surrounding Richmond Street. Very few examples still exist, and the remaining deserve to be considered within the upcoming Swale Heritage Review of Sheerness High Street. The building itself sits just outside, 35 metres outside of the Sheerness Miletown Conservation Area, and we feel this deserves consideration, as the Town Council would have applied for this to be included in any review of the area's heritage in the near future. The timing of this review is in no way under the control of the Town Council or its residents, and this historic building's loss will be to the detriment of the town and its residents. The new building is in no way in keeping with the look of any part of Sheerness High Street or Sheerness Heritage, which of course includes the Bluetown area. The second point, the access to the site is the other consideration to look at with this application, due to its site being within the busy High Street area. During the work, if the application is successful, a very busy access to the High Street will be restricted, especially for school traffic and active travel users. The access and the work on this busy junction will absolutely have the potential to cause chaos within the local community. Traffic in the area and to the business in the High Street that is cited, the recent road closure that Swale put in, to a heavy loss in trade and revenue, along with disruptions to deliveries, public transport and disabled access to the High Street during the road being restricted. The disruption and future access arrangements will also be a danger to pedestrians and traffic because of the position of the access, which is immediately before and after the turning of the traffic lights, which is absolutely busy most of the day, actually. Any hold up will cause congestion and risk at the traffic lights and pedestrian crossing that are part of the junction. This concern also includes emergency vehicular access to the site with site movements, bin collections on either side of the development. This will cause unnecessary risk for the junction and the High Street users. It should also be noted that all of the payments from contributions. Oh,
Councillor White, that's okay. That's your 3 minutes. Thank you for joining us this evening, both from Town Council and your Parish Council. You've rekindled my faith in them. Thank you very much indeed.
Indeed. Thank you, everybody.
Right. Could I now invite James Batson, please, to speak on this item?
Okay. I assume you can hear me okay. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, clear, thank you, James.
Well, I think that Andrew Burns covered most of the points I was going to make quite succinctly. The reason that this application is not being determined under officer powers, but now decided by committee members tonight, hopefully, is because of Sheerness Town Council's objection. They've maybe slightly varied in the response tonight, but we had principally 4 reasons that they were objecting. One of which is that it's one of the only remaining pubs in the town. DHA's planning statement succinctly addresses this by stating that there's 4 other licensed premises within 400 metres of the site. And as Andy said, the application's proposals include a micropub at ground floor. The building itself may be historic but isn't listed and is not a designated heritage asset and is not in a conservation area, although it is close to Miletown Conservation Area. The local authority conservation officer has influenced the final design and is in agreement with the heritage impact assessment provided, and has suggested conservation conditions which will be implemented if the application is approved. The surrounding architecture might be completely different to what we're proposing, but we suggest that it's a contemporary design that is in a prominent location and so should be enhanced, and it's also in keeping with previous approvals in the local area, such as the telephone exchange on Wood Street, which you may be aware of. And in relation to the junction close to Millennium Way, that's actually an existing access to the pub's car park. So we've suggested parking for 6 spaces, and that was based on a 50% ratio when it was originally 12 flats. However, given its sustainable location, we consider that as well as on the basis of the last application, this could be, suggested as 0 really. Now, yeah. So to conclude again, this has been going on for quite some time and has caused implications for the applicant. And we hope that committee members will determine the application in line with the officer's recommendations tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and apologies it's been such a late evening for you. Thank you. So members, I move the officer recommendation. If you have a seconder, please. Thank you very much, Councillor Jays. Councillor Eakin.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, it's at the entrance to the High Street, so the designs are quite important to kind of give the correct impression. Yeah, the design that's actually being proposed is something that is completely different from what is there currently. The original building is of a good design, and I do think that kind of on its own it does have kind of historical importance, but as officers have said in the report, over time I think kind of the more modern parts aren't great, and kind of being honest, I'm not exactly sure which parts of the kind of historical design likely to kind of be saved. The micro pub on the ground floor obviously is great because that is what kind of is in the future of the High Street. In regards to that, 11 o'clock's reasonable. All of the others nearby are at least an hour, if not 2 hours later. So no disturbance kind of in that sense. One question I do have is kind of in regards to deliveries. So pub delivery, pub deliveries, but also glass collection, is allowed. So I was wondering if there could be kind of considered a condition for the pub maybe not to receive deliveries, or for rubbish, notably glass, to be collected before say 9 o'clock. The micro pub on the commercial bit, it is a good design on the corner. I think it is a good appearance for the entrance to the High Street. I guess the main point is, does the flats above really suit the location? The design is slightly boring. I don't think it's going to win any awards, is it? But yeah, I don't think it's bad enough for kind of to vote against it. Traffic wise, kind of I'm largely satisfied kind of on what I've read, notably because there was obviously a car park there before as well. And it is the High Street. I think parking has been addressed. Yeah, so I am leaning slightly towards approval. But yeah, notably, sort of some comments from kind of Linda Brinkley was quite good, notably the kind of the pitch roof aspect. But obviously that's not in the design, so you know we can't really change that. And is it kind of worth voting against it because there's no pitch roof? In my opinion, no. So yeah, I'm leaning towards approval, but reluctantly approval. But I'm interested to hear what kind of others have to say about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Byrne. Is that a condition we could consider? Yeah.
Well, it's possible to impose conditions relating to the timing of deliveries. I think probably what needs to be what members need to bear in mind as well is I would have thought that by 9 o'clock the high street will be quite busy and noisy anyway. Yeah, so that seems to me to be probably an unreasonable time to apply. But I don't know whether pubs would have deliveries at 7 o'clock in the morning. I suspect they don't, but I would imagine that a 7 a.m. time scale would be more appropriate. The other thing to bear in mind, of course, is that it is a micro pub. It is a small premises, probably not going to generate a huge amount of noise on that basis.
Okay, Councillor, can you just want to come back?
Yeah, it was notably the glass, only because someone has complained about glass from somewhere else being emptied quite early. So that's kind of where that's based on.
Okay, Councillor Bonney.
Okay, thank you. Yep, I know this end of the high street quite well, as part of my project has been stripping out the junk along the high street and getting things painted. So a little bit is about the railings at the front. So if you look at the pub as it currently is, there's 2 sets of railings. One set, I believe, are KCCs. Yeah, so on the other side is the set sort of go around the edge of the road, and then there's an inner set right next to the pub because the pub's dipped down. In the new design, do we have to suffer that secondary set of railings? And is there any discussion about those railings generally, which I think are really, I know that junction's really busy, but they're really oppressive, that whole area with railings. So that's my first comment. The second is that side of the pub, when you look at it like that, it's got quite attractive sash windows, etc. I'm with Councillor Eakin. I really don't like the design, and I'm going to be radical. I'm going to go as far as I would like to defer this application because the principle of development here I don't have a problem with. I don't have a problem with a micro pub. I don't have a problem with putting the residential in. I do have a problem with that design. This is a fundamental key corner of that high street to me. And if we don't get that design right and the tone of that design right, then we undermine the rest of the high street and we undermine the conservation area that's not that far away. I think that does look a bit cheap, quite honestly. It's very bland. If you look at the current building, it's got nice white weatherboarding, it's got lovely sash windows. And I'm not suggesting we rehash history, but there is some repetition along the high street with its historic buildings. So there is a local, I don't know whether you call it vernacular or not, but there is a set of materials. I think something more imaginative could be done with those facades. So I would put a proposal down that we adjourn this and have some discussion with the officers could go away and have a discussion with the applicant to see what they could do with the external facades because of the concerns around the high street. And I don't know if anyone wants to second that. And then that also cuts it short for tonight on this one.
1 second, Councillor, you can.
Yeah, I'm willing to second.
Okay, we've had a formal proposal on the floor and that's duly seconded.
Thank you. It was going to be my thing as well, saying about design. As Councillor Eakin mentioned, the roof there, what we could do, and we do have national and local policies that we can push it on. But just on that, I think especially as well with the roof, when you had that on the screen about the building opposite as well, I think that the key thing is here is that this building is a key point as you do drive in through Sheerness, and that building on the opposite side, you could see that the roof line with that just about see it there, but that building opposite is more designed to it just because of the roof. That's it there. So you could easily do something on that corner that is going to look a lot better. And I think definitely pushing on design is the right thing.
Okay, thank you. So we've got the proposal, and would you be happy, Councillor Bonney, if we appended that to in conjunction with ward members and maybe yourself?
Yep. Or is it
You're
going to
happy
come
with
back?
that?
No, it's going to come back. It's a deferral, isn't it?
So, yeah, sorry,
Deferral, yeah, that's fine.
Thank you. Okay, members, those in favour of deferral then? Those against? Any abstentions? So that's 13 for deferral, 1 against, 1 abstention. So we'll defer it to a future meeting. Thank you, members. We now come on to item 212, and now can I just again indulge you just one more time, because I definitely won't be going.
We're reconvening, aren't we? Anyway.
I can't see us finishing everything in the next half hour, Chair.
No, but what I'm saying, we've got 2 people that have been waiting.
Oh,
2
yeah,
members of
2
the public that
speakers.
have been waiting
Two
to
speakers.
speak. I'm just a bit anxious that they've been waiting. So,
Yeah.
but the choice is yours, members.
No, carry on. Do the public speakers.
Okay, thank you. And then, as I say, and then after that, we will definitely come back, because we won't be going beyond that, that's for sure. Okay, so it's item 212 then, please, which is,
Did we move standing orders?
oh, sorry, did you hear standing orders? Okay, for agreement then, thank you very much. Right, so item 212, it's 22/500-843 full, and this is the Isle of Sheppey Holiday Park, Warden Bay Road, Laysdown. And I think the officer for an outline, any updates, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. That's me again. This is an application on one of our established holiday parks. It's a designated holiday park in the local plan, and it contains essentially it's all chalets, which the majority of which are of some age and in relatively poor condition. Show you some photos. Well, there should be some photos on here. Here we go. Here we go. So these are the typical style, design and condition. There's more in the way, I promise. Here we go. Of the chalets that are on the site. And the application is seeking to remove 10 of those chalets and replace with 8 chalets of more modern design and standards. The chalets in question are actually in this area here, which is immediately to the north of the clubhouse. There has been permission granted under delegated powers fairly recently for swap out of 5 chalets with modern chalets, which was dealt with under delegated powers. In terms of the design of the buildings themselves, so that's a sort of 3-dimensional indication of the type of units that are proposed. And then in more technical 2-dimensional terms, they're still essentially, pretty modest structures, but it's upgrading of the park, which is very much supported in the local plan. And supported as well by the council's economy and community services officer. And our recommendation is that planning permission should be granted for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I invite Max Good, please, to speak on this item?
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members of the Planning Committee. This planning application seeks to upgrade and modernise existing chalets at the Isle of Sheppey Holiday Village, allowing the site to provide high-quality, modern facilities to compete in the market at this established holiday park. The applicant wishes to ensure that the accommodation at the Isle of Sheppey Holiday Village remains attractive to the market, and as a result is investing in the site to bring it up to the standards that the market now expects. The Isle of Sheppey Holiday Village is one of several chalet-style holiday villages on the Isle of Sheppey. It comprises 302 chalets spaced around the perimeter of 4 open grassed areas with a clubhouse. This planning application applies to 10 of these existing chalets. The remaining chalets and the facilities on the site are not subject to this planning application. The proposals seek a modest increase in the size of the individual chalets, which are comparable with the modern chalets elsewhere on the Isle of Sheppey. As a result of the increase in size, the proposals result in the loss of the two existing chalets. The replacement chalets are high-quality, modern alternatives of the existing chalets. They offer substantial benefits to the occupiers and will assist in ensuring that the viability and success of the site continues in the future. The replacement chalets are built to a modern specification, which amongst other benefits will ensure increased energy efficiency. The Isle of Sheppey Holiday Village has formed an important part of the Laysdown-on-Sea tourism sector since its inception in the 1950s, and will continue to do so within the constraints of the original and subsequent planning permissions. The proposals have the support of the Swale Economy and Community Services team, and planning officers have recommended approval. It is for the reasons set out within the statement that the planning application being heard before you tonight should be considered in a positive light and planning permission be granted. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So members, I now move the officer recommendation. Could I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Jays. Councillor Eakin.
Thank you, Chair. I will be quick. Yeah, it's been called in as kind of both Warden and Laysdown kind of disagree with the site having a 12-month occupancy. That all the application is for is to replace 10 with 8. So I think it would be unreasonable for 8 to kind of have a different rule to the remainder. Yeah, I can appreciate the parish's opposition, but I think in terms of picking battles, I'm not really sure that this is. I don't know if this is one of them. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. It might be helpful to have a little look at 710 as well. Councillor Beard, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. On that subject, it was my understanding that our constitution says that it will only be called in if the parish council makes objections on planning considerations. Well, they haven't. That they're objecting to something that already has permission. So I can't understand why this is before us and hasn't been done under delegated powers. Whoever made the decision to call it in, I believe was wrong. I think this should have been delegated and dealt with by officers.
You're not alone in that view, but Mr. Byrne.
Well, I mean, the parish council have raised concern regarding the occupancy of the units, which is a planning consideration, albeit that, you know, we don't consider that we can control that because of the historic permission that exists on the site. But the view was taken that that was sufficient material consideration to take to committee.
That's a bit.
Yeah, but the fact that it's got 12-month permission already and they've only referred to it as a holiday park, it actually becomes a licensing issue, not a planning issue. The comment about whether it's permanent residential or whether it's holiday is a licensing issue, not a planning issue.
Sorry, I'll just bring on the legal officer.
Technically, it would constitute a change of planning use, so it would be a planning issue.
Yeah, Councillor Winkles.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to quickly say, looking at the photos just now of the existing chalets, they look very dilapidated to me. And I think any new chalets to replace dilapidated chalets will be an improvement. So I shall be going with the officer's recommendations.
Thank you. Members, I don't see anybody else indicating, so those in favour of the officer recommendations? 14, those against? And abstentions? So the permission is granted subject to issue of the decision notice. That was 14 for and just one abstention. Thank you. Right, we now move on to what will be the final item of the evening, which is item 213. And this is 21/505461/ PSINF. And it is the HMP Stanford Hill, Church Road, East Church. So thank you also for an outline and any updates, please. It's Karina remote. Karina, are you on mute?
No.
Members, just whilst we're waiting for her to get in, the planning working group meeting that we discussed earlier will be held on Monday, the 13th of June. That's Monday, the 13th of June. And that's at 10 o'clock. Tell me why. You don't like Mondays? Oh. Karina, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, we can now. Thank you.
Excellent. Sorry, the button froze and it wouldn't connect. Can you see the site plan that I've shared on the screen?
Yes.
Great, thank you. The application, item 2.13, is at HMP Stanford Hill, which is a Category D open men's prison and is closely related to other prisons which form part of the Sheppey prison cluster. This application seeks the construction of 2 house blocks to provide criminal justice accommodation for 120 prisoners, alongside ancillary buildings to support ongoing running of the prison, including a record store and a library healthcare office. The proposals also include extensions to the visitor car park. The proposed development is shown in red on the plan on the screen, and I change to an aerial image. These are shown in purple on the screen and show how they'd be related to close to the existing buildings within the prison cluster and on HMP Stanford Hill. In terms of updates, members will note the tabled update which was circulated earlier today. These include a copy of KCC Highways comments which raised no objection to the proposal subject to conditions, 3 of which were already in the committee report, and an additional condition is sought, which is number 33, which seeks details of a travel plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Could I now invite Catherine Morgan, please, to speak on this item?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. I'm Catherine Morgan. I'm an associate at Cushman & Wakefield, and I'm the agent for the planning application for 2 new house blocks and associated ancillary works at HMP Stanford Hill. HMP Stanford Hill is a Category D men's prison. Category D prisons are identified as open prisons. Open prisons only house prisoners that have been risk assessed and deemed suitable for open conditions. Category D prisons perform a vital role in the prison service, helping to rehabilitate prisoners, preparing them for their re-entry into society. The prison population is currently forecast to increase over the next 10 years, reaching unprecedented levels by the end of the decade. The Ministry of Justice is embarking on a programme of prison expansion, delivering over 20,000 additional prison places. Of these 20,000 places, 3,500 prison places will be delivered through the expansion, reconfiguration and refurbishment of the existing estate. As part of this programme, a need has been identified to provide additional accommodation at a number of Category D open prisons. Stanford Hill has been identified as a prison which requires additional accommodation. The planning application will provide an additional 120 bed spaces for 120 prisoners at HMP Stanford Hill. In addition, the scheme will provide ancillary facilities, including a new library and healthcare office. There are no specific planning policies that are directly related to prison development in the development plan. Paragraph 96 of the NPPF supports the delivery of new prison infrastructure through collaborative working between local planning authorities, delivery partners and statutory bodies. Whilst the proposal is technically a departure from the development plan, it's considered the proposed development is within an established location and is within the prison boundary. The proposals are of a size and scale in keeping with the existing buildings at the prison. A landscape visual impact assessment was submitted with the planning application and demonstrates the proposals will be largely screened by existing vegetation and there will be no adverse impacts. The construction of the new accommodation and ancillary services will create some opportunities for people to be trained in construction and provide opportunities for businesses, helping to boost the local economy. The MOJ is committed to sustainable development principles. The proposals will be built to BREEAM Excellent certification, and the proposals will also exceed the MOJ's target of over 10% biodiversity net gain. The transport statement confirms that the additional number of vehicles in the AM and PM peak arising from the development proposal will be low, and therefore no highway mitigation works are required. It's therefore considered the proposals are a sustainable form of development which should be granted planning permission. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And again, apologies that you had to wait so long to appear, but thank you for bearing with us.
No problem. Thank you very much.
I now move the officer recommendation. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Jays. Councillor Beart.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I know this site extremely well, and for the first
from the outside.
Well, I was going to say for the first time. Indeed, for the first time in my life, I can sit here and not declare an interest on this. However, I have a couple of things that I wanted to raise. I got no problem with the application itself. I got a lot of sympathy with the comments from the parish council. It is well known that at shift change times, Church Road is an absolute nightmare. The speeds that are done along there, and I'm talking about officers, the speeds that are done along there are atrocious. Now, the reason I wanted to bring it up, KCC, we've got a tabled update from them, and they've done their forecast vehicular trips on staff numbers, and you've got 4 additional staff on the early shift, 4 additional staff on the late shift, and 2 staff on the night shift. As has been mentioned, this is a Cat D. It's an open prison. The prisoners go out. You have minibuses that run prisoners to their jobs. A lot of prisoners have their own vehicles and drive in and out of the prison. None of that is mentioned in the vehicular trip calculations that I can tell. I don't think the impact has been correctly weighed up. This talking about an additional 10 staff and then 3 non-operational staff, that is not the impact that this development is going to have. Now, I'm not looking to refuse it on those grounds, but I do think that actually this is something that KCC needs to look at again, because I don't think they've respectfully understood what the application is applying for. The evidence is there, the fact that they're asking for a 40-car park extension. The amount, even at visiting times, the amount of additional visitors you're going to have for an additional 120 prisoners, this is going to make it a lot busier, and I don't think talking about 13 staff does it any sort of. So I will propose a deferment and ask that we ask KCC to revisit this on the basis of the actual car movements that we're expecting, not on what this update says. I would have brought it up before, but as this is a tabled update that's been dated today, it's not very helpful.
Yeah, I'll share your views on that as well. Okay. So, seconded. Right. Those in favour of deferral, members? Sorry, you got a cough? Okay. You said they're getting tired, they can't hold on any longer. Are you happy just with the highways issues, or is there anything else? Yes, okay. Right, yeah, that's fine. Unanimous that, so I will defer that for further highways input. Members, just before we all disappear, I just wanted to say two things really. Firstly, though he's not here with us, is to thank James Freeman, our head of planning, who's now moved on, and I'm sure you would all share that view with me. But of equal importance, somebody who managed to slip out the door tonight after his input, and he doesn't normally like talking very much, but Graham Thomas was actually at his last meeting with us this evening because he's retiring at the end of the month. So we sadly won't be seeing him, but I'd just like to formally record it, certainly on my behalf, and I'm sure it's on all of your behalves. Oh, thanks. Thank you all very much. Oh, yeah, sorry. Oh. Kelly, when's the? We're just. We're deferring to. Sorry, did you want to speak? Sorry, Councillor. Oh no, that's it.
I was going to say, Mr. Chairman, that as we've deferred that item, can I suggest that we also have our independent transport people look at it?
Yes, there's no reason why we shouldn't. Yeah, okay. I don't know, that's beyond the realms. And so our extraordinary meeting will be held 7 o'clock on Monday. Yeah. Right, so Thursday. Okay. Right. Okay. Right. It's got to be. Well, it's got to be Thursday because obviously we haven't got members here. We'd like to be quorate, and to be fair, I am that individual that likes as much input as we possibly can, so as many members here as possible. So we can't. Democratic Services can't do Tuesday because there's some training already booked in for chairman training, whatever here as well. So they can't support that for us. So it will have to be Thursday, members, I'm afraid. Well, I don't know if any members will be going up and doing it. So it's there we are. All right, thank you. Right, thank you, members. Thank you for indulgence this evening. It is Thursday, 7 o'clock. Thank you all, and have a safe trip home, and thanks for indulgence, and I'll see you on Thursday at 7.